Hi there! Today's story spotlight is The Baby Dragon Tames the Crazy People. Hit subscribe and let's go! The daughter, beloved by the sea dragon, was an empress who received the blessing of the seas and became the ruler of the great empire of Atlantis, Terrassa Neptunos Atlantis. The magician Kaortan assured that their country would exist forever, and the first general said that he would remain by its side until the very last days. The empress asks whether he takes the oath as her henchman or as her lover. The magician kisses her hand and says that he swears both as a servant and as a loving person. The empress admits that today she needs him more than ever, and asks what her friend thinks about it. Doom tells the empress that he is as loyal to her as he is. She replies that she knows this perfectly well, as they are the only ones left on her side. At that moment, the main character thought that it would always be like this, but she did not understand why these two were so close. Suddenly, the empress overheard the conversation between the mage and the first general. Doom cried out and told the mage that he knew how he felt, then confessed that he loved him. Doom claims that he loves him so much that his heart would break. Kaortan replies that he has known this for a long time and hugs the man. Seeing this, the empress was shocked, not understanding how her concubine and her friend could love each other. She says Kaortan claimed to love her and doesn't understand how he could betray her like that. At the same time, she thinks she might have misunderstood. Doom turns to Her Majesty and asks her never to forgive him. She replies that she had hoped otherwise, but in the end, both betrayed her. The general says that since she found out everything, it's even better, because now she can finish with it faster. The magician grabs the empress by the hand and says that he must show her something right now. The protagonist, surrounded by chains, asks if he wanted her to see this. She doesn't understand how they dared do this to her and lie to her. Atlantis says that she trusted them and loved them so much. Kaortan asks Her Majesty for forgiveness, and the empress asks if this is his entire answer. The magician explains that he only wanted to protect the one he loves. The main character says that her lover and longtime friend betrayed her, and asks why things went so far. Suddenly, the empress realizes they had planned it all along. She thinks she'll make them regret it and never forgive them until all life is extinguished in this world, cursing them both. After these words, the Empress of Atlantis was sealed away. She spent 1,000 years in chains of sadness and despair, knowing she would never forgive them and would take revenge if given the slightest chance. The main character realizes that at that moment someone heard her voice, and the seal that bound her began to crack. The Empress first mistakes the strange sounds for rain, then smells blood and realizes that the seal is broken. She sees a wounded maid and a man with a sword who demands the Duke's daughter be handed over. The Empress doesn't understand what's happening and thinks this is the beginning of her second life. Kaortan's spell is broken. The chains no longer bind her, her senses return, and she is once again connected to Atlantis. The main character realizes that she is now just a child, and thinks that all this is just a dream. The maid holds a little girl in her arms and says that she must carry her to the imperial palace, asking her to be patient for a little while. Hearing this, the girl does not understand why they are addressing her like that. At this time, the knight says that it is time for her to surrender, puts his sword to her throat, and offers to leave the servant alive if she gives up the girl. The maid, screaming, replies that she will not give up this child, and asks if he knows who she is. The robber says that the girl's name is Nicephorus Resian, and again demands that she give him the daughter of Duke Resian. He adds that the Duchess desperately uttered her name before she was cast into eternal sleep. Hearing this, the maid covers the girl's ear and screams at him to be quiet. The robber threatens to send her to her mother, but the maid snatches a knife and wounds him. At this moment, the main character realizes that the maid is not so simple, and the mercenaries are hunting specifically for her. The girl thinks that in her past body, she would have wiped them off the face of the earth. Terrassa's last memory is a dream about Kaortan and Doom betraying her. The magician said that her body would never decompose, calling her a pathetic and useless empress. The main character remembers that she had this nightmare every night for 1,000 years in chains and decides to survive and take revenge on everyone. A robber attacks a maid, demanding that she hand over her child. The girl falls to the ground and thinks she doesn't care anymore since she's been reborn in someone else's body. The little girl understands that now she must help the maid and definitely survive. The main character thinks that she doesn't want to die again, concentrates and uses magic, feeling that she succeeded. A drip attack knocks the bandits off their feet. The girl thinks that without breath, they won't be able to attack, smiles, and mentally mocks them. The surprised maid asks if she really saved her. The maid picks the girl up, hugs her, and tells her that everyone thought she was special. The girl thinks it wasn't so much that she saved her as that she herself survived. The maid says that everyone was worried about her, and after the prediction, they became the target of many. Suddenly, the main character smells the sea, and the maid doesn't understand what's happening. When the maid turns around, she sees a huge wave and screams that they need to run. The little girl smiles, and the maid tells her not to be happy. The heroine thinks the sea has sensed her aura and responded to her for the first time in 1,000 years. The maid wonders how this is possible and thinks that it is the little mistress's power, wondering if the girl really belongs to her. The protagonist realizes the sea has come for Terasa's energy. The maid says she wants to believe it's her power and recalls the prophecy about the dragon princess. Hearing this, the girl does not understand the meaning of the words, and the maid says that she is tired and suggests that she get some sleep. The main character, confused, remembers how her father defended Adele and ordered her to take Nicephorus to the emperor. Ninnis takes the baby in her arms and says that she must definitely survive. Nicephorus' memories of how someone put her parents into eternal sleep and her mother barely saved her surface in the heroine's head. The girl realizes this could be her reincarnation. Because of the seal, she doesn't fully remember her past life, but she realizes that Terasa and Nicephorus are herself. The little lady can't get used to the baby's body, admitting that it's cute, but it's uncomfortable to move in. The main character reflects on how the great empress of Atlantis became a tiny child. She realizes that being the duke's youngest daughter is already a good start. On her way home, the girl sees a capital city that seems eerily familiar. She realizes that in a past life, this was her empire, the capital of Atlantis. At this moment, the main character realizes that she is now in the country of those who betrayed her. The little lady realizes that from an empress, she has become a duke's daughter. Seeing the neglected walls and cobwebs, she is surprised by the noble family's treatment, but she is comforted by the proximity of the sea and the thought of revenge against Cowardin and Doom. A maid comes into the room, asks if the miss is awake, hugs her, and says that she probably feels uncomfortable in a new place. The maid tells her it's time to eat and that this will help her grow up healthy. The protagonist thinks she needs to grow up faster and find out what spell was cast on her. The girl thinks she already wants to try the imperial food. The maid notices how the miss clenches her fists sweetly and shakes her head. The maid says that Mrs. Ninnis would be happy about this and adds that the older brothers will return soon, since the war with the Yorju pirates ended the day before yesterday. Suddenly, the main character feels the aura of a sea dragon and does not understand how this is possible, because this is not Atlantis. Upon seeing the man, the little lady thinks his hair looks like Carton's, but as she gets closer, she realizes it's not him and becomes curious. The maid greets His Majesty. The man asks if this is the last offering and remarks that the girl is the spitting image of her mother. His Majesty asks if she witnessed the Rysian couple's final moments. The maid replies that she was only thinking about saving Miss San and doesn't know what happened to her masters. The emperor clarifies the words about the prophecy and thinks about what kind of creatures they are. At this time, the little girl begins to have difficulty breathing, and she does not understand what is happening. His Majesty says the Duke and Duchess's funeral will take place after their son's return, and that the girl will be able to attend. Hearing this, the maid thanks him. The emperor adds that this child can cure the madness of young dragons, and therefore she must be well cared for. The main character does not understand what they are talking about and what kind of offering this is, realizing that for them she is not a person, but a medicine. The girl knows that the crown prince has 3 options and hopes that she will not be included in this list. The little lady remembers that when dragons show signs of madness, it is enough to add sea urchin and seaweed to the water, boil it and drink it, and she does not understand why this is not done and why they are attached to her in particular. Nicephorus looks at His Majesty and thinks he resembles Cowardin, though their personalities are different. She waves her hands and wonders who he is. The emperor approaches the crib and asks if she's interested in who he is. The girl looks at him, thinking that, of course, she is. The man says he's a longtime friend of Karzan Rysian, the girl's father, and her mother, Ninnis Rysian, as well as the emperor of the Kawartan Empire. Hearing this, the girl is surprised and thinks that she has found this idiot, noting that he even named the empire after himself. The main character reflects that if he wanted power so much, he could have simply asked, because she would not have refused. And she understands that this emperor is a descendant of Cowardin. The little lady remembers how the magician and Doom loved each other, and she wonders why he needed a child from another woman. His Majesty takes the girl in his arms and she thinks that they are brothers, feeling pain, after which she begins to cry and scream. The man doesn't understand her reaction and asks the servants, but they don't know what to say. The girl thinks he has no control over his strength. Cowerton says she's unlikely to be hungry or bored and asks if she needs her diaper changed. The girl continues to cry, and His Majesty decides that this is her way of expressing her love. She, however, thinks he's talking complete nonsense. The Emperor says that she is cute and interesting and reacts to his words as if he understands everything. The butler remarks that she is only a child and cannot understand speech. His Majesty asks in surprise how he dares to contradict him. The butler, in a panic, apologizes for his misbehavior. The man puts the girl in her crib and says he doesn't understand why he scares her too. The girl puts on a serious face, and he decides she's not afraid of him. The main character thinks he has no reason to frighten her and glares at him. He smiles and says he understands, as she's clearly not shy. The Emperor says he can do something and starts playing with the girl. She thinks about the horror she just witnessed. The man recalls how the girl's mother, during her pregnancy, asked Agrio to protect the children if they died too early, so that they would not become an offering and Nicefero could lift the curse on the imperial family. His Majesty washes himself and thinks that once again he was unable to change anything, that he was unable to protect his sister and friends. The Emperor asks a servant about the events at the sacrificial palace and about the child. The butler replies that the night passed peacefully and there were no attacks. The servant asks if the Emperor really thinks the baby is a dragon princess, but he abruptly orders him to be silent and asks if he has decided to go into eternal sleep today. The Kaortan imperial family has been cursed for 1,000 years, causing hallucinations, pushing them to plunge others into eternal sleep, and causing unbearable pain throughout the body. All subsequent emperors went mad, and the family began to make offerings, one of which was the Duchy of Rizian. Rizian's ancestor was the first and only dragon princess, capable of curing the emperor's madness. Before her passing, she declared that centuries later a new dragon princess would be born, and the sins of the Kaortan family would be forgiven. A pronouncement that became the stuff of imperial legend. Everyone was waiting for a new dragon princess, and every child in the Rizian family was locked in the palace and sacrificed to stop the crown prince's madness. But even after that, the parents entrusted this child to the emperor. His Majesty ponders whether they can earn forgiveness for their sins. He believes that if the girl truly is the dragon princess, then on the crown prince's 19th birthday, a trip to the offering palace will atone for everything. He remembers the girl in his arms, her cute, chubby cheeks, pouting lips, and indignant look, which contained all her charm. The man remembers books that said, "Children smile when adults do so," and immediately thinks the author of that book was a liar and should be arrested. At this time, the little girl begins to scream and thinks about how he dares to abuse the power given to him. His Majesty asks what he can do to make her smile, and notices that she is looking at him as if she wants something. He says that if she smiles, he'll decorate the room and add more servants. The girl thinks she doesn't need it and makes a sad face. The maid looks at the girl pleadingly and asks her to smile. The protagonist recalls the magician's words about how, if she just wants it, the whole world will bow at her feet. She thinks they're all like leeches, too intrusive, and quietly babbles. The master asks what she said. The butler assures her it was "Papa," and the maid confirms. The girl, however, doesn't understand when she said it. The servant says that she considers him her father, and the main character immediately understands that this is not true. His Majesty looks at her and thinks that with such a smile, she looks even more like her mother. He gives her a toy and tells her that in KR10, newborns are given a turtle to ensure a long life. The main character thinks that he locked her in the Palace of Offerings and at the same time wishes her a long life. The gentleman strokes her head, asks her to take care of the toy, and says that only in this way will he be able to look her parents in the eyes without shame. When he leaves the room, a severe headache pierces him. He thinks these are signs of madness, and hears voices commanding him to put everyone into eternal sleep and destroy them. After this, he washes himself, and the servants notice that something is wrong with the master, offering to accompany him to the palace. His Majesty claims they're just servants, but he knows they're Roxborough's spies. He brought them here on purpose, and they're completely unaware and smiling. The maid says it's a misunderstanding, but he replies that since they're convinced the girl is alive, they'll try sending assassins again. The gentleman says that during his fits of madness they would be just right as an offering. Hearing this, the servants begin to blame each other, but he no longer hears them and sends everyone to another world. Korton wipes his face and tells Ninis not to worry, because he will protect her until the end. The maid plays with the girl and admires how misunderstands words and barely cries. She's certain that nothing less could be expected from the Rizian family, but the heroine thinks she doesn't want such consolation. The maid says that she is more talented than her brothers, although they were also incredible from childhood, and assures that the brothers will immediately understand this. The maid offers to put her to bed if she is tired, and the main character thinks about the fact that she never had brothers. The maid puts the girl to bed and tells her to close her eyes because she is the cutest in Kawartan. The little lady doesn't want to sleep and thinks that it's too early for her because she wants to know too much. The next morning, the young gentleman touches her cheeks and tells her she was born fearless. Her brother asks him to stop, afraid of hurting her. The young gentleman objects and assures that he knows perfectly well how to deal with children. The girl feels like the room is too noisy. She opens her eyes, sees two boys, and doesn't understand who they are. Nicephore assumes that these are Nathaniel Rasayan and Hybert Rasayan, her brothers who returned from defeating the pirates, and notes that they do indeed look alike. Hybert invites his brother to look at her, saying that she is looking so intently as if she can sense their energy. Nathaniel says she's been born with immense strength. She thinks he senses Tarasa's power within her and begins flapping her fists, wanting to hear more. The pink-haired brother suggests she wants to play, and maybe call them brothers. Hybert says he read a book about children and that at that age they can pronounce individual words. The girl thinks that's impossible. Nathaniel suggests that she say the word brother, but, hearing no answer, decides that it is too early. Hybert says that from now on she will grow quickly and will soon speak, because she is a carrier of the blood of the coral fairies. Coral fairies are considered the strongest seafaring warrior race. They don't retreat, they face death head-on, and they awaken their abilities early. Most coral fairies are incredibly beautiful, and humans often attack them in an attempt to enslave them. Hearing this, the main character thinks that the mercenaries could have attacked her mother, precisely because of her connection with the coral fairies. Brother says that as they reach adulthood, members of this race become incredibly strong, but develop slowly in the first year of life. Hybert suggests that she could become stronger than even themselves and their mother. The younger brother admits that he still cannot believe what happened to his mother and does not understand who dared to attack his parents. Hybert replies that it doesn't fit in his head. But the Rizians have too many enemies, and the prediction only fuels others, greed. The brother asks if he is talking about the Dragon Princess. Hearing this, the girl remembers the words of the Emperor and Adele and understands that the prediction concerns her. Nathaniel says he's learned the prophecy but doesn't fully understand it. Hybert explains that 5 priests of Remet saw it, so it's considered true. Nicephorus doesn't understand what the Dragon Princess means. Her brother comes closer and says she seems interested too. Hybert asks if he really thinks the little girl understands them, and is told that they will never know. The elder brother says the prophecy speaks of a crack that will open at the promised hour, and of purest power blossoming after suffering. The daughter of the sea will bless the young dragon, so that he can finally find peace. Unprecedented prosperity will come, and so they are left to pray, not knowing which way the blade will turn, and ask for forgiveness, even if the pain of repentance does not disappear. The land of red soil, where true reverence rests, will send them back to their roots, for it is there that their salvation lies. The main character thinks that the daughter of the sea is her, and decides to think everything through carefully, because what was said clearly refers to the Rizaean family. The purest power will blossom, and it is without a doubt the power of the sea, pointing to her again. The girl contemplates the idea that Nicephorus Rizaean and the Empress of Atlantis are one and the same. Everything points to Tarasa Neptunos Atlantis and her reincarnation. The main character thinks about the Ramet shrine, which serves the god of the earth, which seems to ask her for forgiveness, and this seems strange to her. Her brother picks her up and says she's unusual. The little lady starts to feel dizzy. Nathaniel notices that she has no special markings, and is unsure how to tell if she's a princess. Hybert suggests waiting for her powers to awaken, and taking their time. Hybert says that with the awakening of the power she will make a deal with the crown prince, and then the curse will disappear. That is the meaning of the dragon princess. The crown prince is only 5 years old now, and no one knows what will happen when he awakens in 14 years. The brother says that if the curse disappears, they will be able to leave here, because there will no longer be a reason to stay. Hearing this, Nathaniel rejoices, because he did not want to die, and asks the girl why she appeared now. Hybert says the dragon princess hasn't been born for so long that everyone has lost hope. He thanks her and promises to protect her. The main character thinks that the brothers were also afraid of death because they were still so young and were left here without parents. The girl feels that this affects her too. Her body remembers her parents' warmth, her father's kindness, and her mother's desperate fight for her life. Nicephorus doesn't understand why she's crying, because she's lived for over 1,000 years, but she acts like a child. The brother does not understand her behavior and thinks that his sister has fallen asleep again. Hybert tells his brother not to wake her and to leave. He says he'll come tomorrow with toys and asks her to wait for him. Nicephorus thinks that if they come, she will not feel so lonely, and she realizes that she likes the brothers. A couple of days later, her brother comes back with toys and invites her to play. The girl thinks they've been visiting her every day since they first met. The little lady begins to babble, and the second brother calls her foe. While playing with the toy, the girl thinks that she would rather see the sea than sit here. Nathaniel asks why she is sad and offers to kiss her on the cheek. The little lady objects, kicking her legs and thinking how dare he do this to her imperial body. The main character points to the window, and her brother understands her wish, taking her in his arms. Nicephore looks at the sea and thinks about her homeland, dreaming of swimming with whales and dolphins and singing with mermaids. She remembers sleeping on turtle shells as if it were yesterday, and she knows she's unlikely to return, but she still wants to get into the water. Her pink-haired brother takes her away from the window, considering it dangerous, and she can't do anything with this body. The main character notices a book on her brother and reaches for it, but the older brother refuses to give it up. The little lady begins to tremble, and then he offers to kiss him on the cheek, citing books about children and affection. The silver-haired boy says that since her parents are gone, he is taking their place, and if she refuses, she will never see the book. Nicephorus thinks about how she, the Empress of Atlantis, must kiss someone and decides not to give in. Starting to cry, her brother says that to achieve what she desires, she must sacrifice something. The heroine thinks she won't let herself be confused because her reputation is important to her. Hybert takes his sister in his arms, and she kisses him. He speaks with delight of the strange and warm feeling of parenthood. The main character thinks that he should stop talking nonsense and just give her the book. While Nicephorus examines the book, she is secretly watched by a mercenary assigned by the emperor to guard the dragon princess. He is forbidden to speak to her or reveal his identity. Watching the girl, he thinks how much he wants to talk to her, noting her cute nose, pink hair, and plump legs. Hearing the little lady reading, the mercenary is amazed at how quickly modern children learn. Nicephorus thinks that the emperor kept his word and assigned her a bodyguard, and perhaps new maids will appear soon, after which she continues reading. The first emperor, Kaortan, was one of the survivors of Atlantis. When the thriving empire sank beneath the waves, only 2 apostles remained alive. Kaortan, using magic from the sea dragon sanctuary, created a new empire, but at the cost of a terrible curse from the sea monster. Only the dragon princess, the ancestor of the Resian family, could cure this madness. Before leaving, she said that a new princess would appear who would save the imperial family and, after awakening, would form a contract with the crown prince. After reading this, the heroine thinks about how Atlantis sank underwater and returned to land every 10 years. Sea and land alternated. The Atlanteans lived by the water and could breathe beneath it. She thinks the empire is gone, and the curse seems too artificial. The agreement is concluded in the central sanctuary of Remet, and is possible only after the princess turns 15 years old. As Nicephorus reads further, he realizes that the method for breaking the curse is described in detail, but it is not clear what its true essence is. Madness is described as body-rending pain, difficulty breathing, terrifying visions, and strange voices. The book tells of the voice of a young woman, full of pain and hatred, and the scream of a girl cursing everything around her. The main character thinks this would drive anyone crazy. A shudder runs through her, and she resolves to live to 15 and conclude the agreement as soon as possible. Nicephore reflects that she is unlikely to be forced to marry the crown prince, and she wants to grow up as quickly as possible. In the corridor, the maid thanks the others for their help in preparing for the funeral and reports that no new servants have yet been assigned to the offering palace. The maid quietly opens the door, sees that the little girl is sleeping, clearly exhausted, and asks her to tidy up carefully and leave immediately. Suddenly, the main character hears a voice asking for help and realizes that she has heard it before. She doesn't understand what exactly she needs help with and mentally asks him to tell her since she can hear the voice. The voice replies that he is in unbearable pain, as if his body is being torn apart, and the torment is becoming unbearable. Nicephore is at a loss and does not understand how she can help, wondering whether this is an illusion or reality, because a little boy appears in front of her. The boy tearfully begs for help and asks for help with the last of his strength. The vision suddenly disappears, and she is confused, not understanding what is happening. But then the boy appears again, and she tries to figure out who he is. Waking up the next day, the girl thinks that she does not understand what happened, considering the boy a mirage, but the suffering in his eyes was all too real. The little lady wonders if she will be able to see him again. The maid informs that today is the day of her parents' funeral, adding that the culprits have not yet been found and that vigilance must not be relaxed. The maid suggests putting on more protective clothing and asks if this would be an objection, which confuses the girl. The maid explains that it is always cold and windy by the sea, so she chose a warm morning dress and even prepared armor in case of danger, saying that she herself is dressed the same way. Hearing this, the main character understands that an ordinary maid would not think about armor, and her interest in Adele only intensifies. Nicephore recalls that in Atlantis, funerals always took place at sea, because life began in the water and returned there after death. She understands that the customs here are similar, and both the procession and the clothing remind her of her homeland. The elder announces that today Courtin lost 2 protectors, the Duke and Duchess of Rizienne, but their children survived by the will of the sea god. He wishes that no one else will experience such pain of loss and blesses the children with a long life. 2 white boats, decorated with flowers, sail out to sea, symbolizing the journey to a new life. Nathaniel cries as he remembers his parents, promised to go on a journey with him after his return, and he doesn't understand why they didn't keep their word. He says that they shouldn't have left and that he would have been able to protect them if he had been there. The little girl also cries, realizing that in this life she has felt parental love, and decides that she will not forgive the guilty and will definitely take revenge. Finding support, Nicephore decides to gather the power of the sea while he can, not knowing when he will be able to return here again. Suddenly she feels sand in the air. Her nose starts to itch badly, and she finds it difficult to even control herself. The townspeople decide that the heavens are angry at the death of the Duke and Duchess, considering it a sign of trouble, and discuss how the Rizian line is doomed unless the girl is the dragon princess. Hearing this, the main character is indignant, not understanding how one can discuss such things in front of children, and thinks that they should be silenced. Remembering how the emperor liked her smile, she decides to give it a try and smiles, mentally wishing for the chatterbox to shut up. At the funeral banquet, the duke's daughter is seated in a chair, and one of the ladies remarks how sweet she is with a serious face and no tears, which makes the girl think that they are well versed in such things. The lady asks her friend whether the emperor is planning to marry and choose an empress. Hearing this, the little lady thinks that His Majesty has no wife, and the reason is probably his madness and fear of harming his wife. The lady in the yellow dress says that she is worried about the emperor, even though the crown prince is there, after which they leave without letting him hear the most important thing. Another woman whispers that His Highness is too weak even for such events and is becoming increasingly ferocious, because there are rumors that the day before yesterday he plunged all his servants into eternal sleep. She adds that he swung the sword in his bloody hands, possibly due to madness, and that he writhes in pain and cries every day. The girl remembers the boy who asked for help and thinks that it might be the crown prince, although he looked older than 5 years old and did not seem cruel at all. The main character decides that she should ask about it herself, because he called her before, and now she wants to ask first. Nicephore asks if he is the crown prince, and again hears a plea for help, realizing that in front of her is the one who is to become her husband, and sees a boy next to her. The butler informs the emperor that the funeral banquet has begun, and he replies that he will come soon, asking if the Roxboroughs have arrived. The servant replies that they have just arrived with the prince, and the emperor says that he must find out something from them. The butler cautiously asks if he suspects them of the death of the Duke and Duchess, and the emperor replies that they are foreigners who are wary of Courtin. His Majesty adds that the awakening of the dragon princess will bring prosperity to the empire, and someone might be afraid of this. The Roxborough royal family is the second most powerful after the imperial family, so suspicion falls primarily on them, and the emperor asks about the progress of the investigation. The butler reports that all 3 assassin guilds have been checked, but there are no traces. Hearing this, the emperor thinks that at any clue he would immediately behead the royal prince and orders them to go and look at their faces. Nicephorus looks at the boy and asks if he inflicted these wounds on himself, feeling sorry for him and realizing how much he has been through. She tries to figure out if it is a trumpet call, but again she hears a call for help and screams, asking him not to leave because she has so many questions. Entering the hall, the emperor thanks everyone for their attention and announces that, in memory of the defenders of the empire and his friends, a guest from distant lands has arrived. Hearing this, the main character understands that an important person is about to appear and reaches out to the maid to lift her up and let her see everything. Gunther Gen Roxborough, Crown Prince of Roxborough, greets His Majesty. The Emperor notes that the journey was long, and the boy thanks him for the warm welcome. His Majesty wonders whether the prince has come to offer condolences or to examine the consequences of his actions. The prince says that he cannot fully understand their loss, because he himself is still a child, and has come to console children who have lost their parents. The Emperor notes his confident speech and praises him for it. The boy thanks them and says that he has brought gifts for the mourners, offering to accept them as consolation. Nicephore, watching this, thinks about Roxborough's feud with the Empire and realizes that the Emperor suspects them of the death of her parents. She decides that if this is true, she will never forgive them and will not show mercy. Adele notices the girl's anxiety, asks what's wrong, and offers to change her diaper, asking if she's hungry. The prince looks at the little lady and thinks that this is his bride. He comes closer, and she notices familiar features. Nicephore remembers a brazen and stubborn guy from Atlantis, just as bold and self-confident. The boy looks at her intently, and she doesn't understand why he's so surprised, because she still has 1,000 years to grow. Adele advises that it is better not to get involved with him, and the girl thinks that she never backs down from a fight. The prince touches her and says that she is strange and unremarkable, doubting that the prophecy could be about her. Hearing this, the little lady pushes the prince with all her might, mentally asking him not to be arrogant. When the boy rises and pushes her back, the maid indignantly asks what he is doing, swinging at the child, and the girl is glad of Adele's support. The prince justifies himself by saying that she hit him first. At that moment, Heber comes up and coldly asks if he intended to harm his sister. Gunther claims that she attacked first, but his brother replies that it is unworthy for a prince to raise a hand against a baby. Hearing this, the main character thinks that he still needs to study and study because he is 1,000 years older than her. The emperor watches the scene and thinks that the girl is amazing for daring to stand up to the arrogant boy. The butler notes that he even heard the sound of the blow, not understanding how such small hands are capable of this. The emperor smiles, saying that she is a real cutie, and he would like to see this scene again. The servant notes that this is the first time his master has smiled like this since the death of the empress. The emperor thinks about the loss of his sister, Karzin and Nanis, and realizes that he is now obliged to protect the crown prince and the child of his friends. His Majesty asks if the maids are ready for the offering palace, and the servant assures him that the best have been chosen. The emperor asks if there is anything unusual going on there, and the servant says that the miss is in a good mood and is dancing like a dad, offering to keep it a secret. The main character recalls how, when she was an empress, she relaxed with friends. The magician asks her not to look at him like that. It interferes with her concentration, and she apologizes and admits that his hands are too beautiful not to hold them. Kaorton says that it is not becoming for her to apologize often. She agrees, but still does not let go of his hand. Remembering this, the main character thinks that she would gladly tear them both apart, not understanding why they betrayed her, and longs for Atlantis. She decides to find out what happened to her and why Kaorton betrayed her, realizing that this requires access to the secret library. The next day, the maids bring the gift to the little lady and ask her if she likes it. Having climbed into the walker, the girl thinks that her freedom is over, but then she rushes to the large window to see the sea again. Suddenly, Nicephorus hears the voice again, begging for help and complaining of pain. She reassures him, promising to find him soon, and reaches out to the unfamiliar boy asking for help. The next moment, she finds herself in another place and realizes that it is teleportation, seeing the crown prince lying in bed. At first, she thinks he is dead, but notices that he is alive, and sees dragon horns on his head, realizing that he has dragon blood in him. Nicephorus is surprised why there is no one next to him, because he is sick, and he understands that this boy does not look like a 5-year-old at all. Coming closer, she notes his flawless features and incredible beauty, feeling the desire to protect him. She thinks that such a child needs care, and puts a wet towel on his forehead. When he opens his eyes, the girl says that there is no need to worry, because for her he is just a wounded seal, wishing him not to get sick, but he does not understand her. The crown prince looks at her, not understanding where she came from, and thinks that this is another manifestation of madness. The main character remembers that in the book, there was another way to help him besides the contract, and tries to recall it. Before the agreement is made, the madness can be weakened by resonance, but she does not understand how to touch him without causing pain. Suddenly, the boy pulls her towards him and places her on his chest, and she feels how difficult it becomes to breathe. Nisefor wonders why he no longer asks for help as before, and thinks that it is because she has seen his true state, finding his stubbornness even attractive. The next day, she sees a boy who asks if she is awake, and senses the aura of the sea dragon, realizing that its power is enormous, but the sea seems to reject it. The little lady comes closer and asks if he feels better. The crown prince admits that when he looks at her, the pain disappears. He is sure that she is the dragon princess from the legends and asks her about it directly. The prince recalls their resonance and says that with age he will become stronger, sincerely thanking the girl. A boy with black hair offers her milk, but she refuses, complaining that it makes her sick and dreams of a well-done steak and shrimp in butter. The prince doesn't understand what the girl is saying and calmly asks if she wants something else. The young lady is amazed that he seems to have heard her thoughts. The guy explains that when she is too emotional, he only gets bits and pieces of what she is thinking. A servant enters the room and cautiously asks if His Highness has called him. Seeing Ms. Ryzian, he is frankly taken aback. The young master orders that food be brought for both himself and the girl. The prince suddenly realizes he doesn't know her name and asks. Then he remarks that to find out for sure, he'll have to call someone who knows her better. The little lady mutters something under her breath and thinks that she could say the name herself, but she understands that he still won't understand her. The boy admits that he doesn't want to let her go and has absolutely no idea what to do now. The little girl thinks he should stop, because he won't be able to take care of her. Almost immediately, she decides she'll tell him the name herself. The prince says he's pleased to meet Nicephorus and introduces himself as Scion. At that moment, she thinks he could have pulled off such a stunt blindfolded, and it's unlikely he'd be surprised. The little lady finds herself unable to believe he's only 5 years old. He has beautiful eyes, and he doesn't look like an emperor at all. Zion insists he really is 5. The girl is surprised again, thinking he's heard her thoughts, but the guy explains he understood everything from her look. The prince explains that children of the imperial family grow up faster than usual. He is the son of the previous emperor, and the current emperor is her mother's younger brother. Then he asks why she looks at him that way. The boy replies that she's sweet. He adds that she understands everything around her perfectly well, she just can't speak yet. The main character thinks he's trying to melt her heart with his looks. She decides she wouldn't mind marrying him, lifting the curse, and then quietly divorcing him. The little lady realizes that she feels too sorry to leave him alone with such pain. At that moment, her brother bursts into the room and, screaming excitedly, asks if she had imagined how worried they were. His Highness asks the servants if he asked for food to be brought, and notices that they also called other people. The maid falls to the floor and explains that she only brought breakfast, after which she asks in horror not to be put into eternal sleep. Hearing this, the main character can't understand how someone could be put into eternal sleep for such a thing. She wants to diffuse the situation as quickly as possible. Nicephor smells the aroma of well-roasted meat and loudly declares that she's hungry as a wolf. She demands food and asks not to punish the maid. The girl realizes that no one understands her anyway, falls onto the bed and starts crying. Her brother comes closer and asks her worriedly what hurts. Zion allows the maid to leave. Hearing this, she thanks the miss with relief. The young gentleman feeds the little girl himself, and she happily opens her mouth and eats. The brother asks permission to pick up Nicephorus after feeding and explains that everyone was very worried about her. The main character thinks it's no surprise, since she disappeared so suddenly. At the same time, she's completely reluctant to part with Zion. The prince unexpectedly refuses. The brother is surprised and doesn't understand why. The young master explains that the little lady wishes to remain here, by his side, and not in the offering palace. He then turns to Nicephorus and asks if he is right. The girl thinks about how Zion has been alone all this time. He may look healthy, but inside he's constantly struggling with himself, and even now he can barely stand. The prince promises to give her everything she wants if only she stays by his side. The main character realizes she can't leave him. At that moment, he picks her up. The servants whisper among themselves that they are completely unsuitable for each other. The girl hears everything and doesn't understand why Zion is silent. A maid quietly inquires whether the prince will harm the duke's daughter. Another servant suggests that she will soon become his offering. The little lady is puzzled as to what kind of people these are, because she knows that the gentleman hears everything perfectly well. Zion orders his servant Joseph to take the man away and assigns him a punishment, 30 lashes and dismissal. The servant confirms the order and takes away the one who allowed himself to have bad thoughts about the prince. The guilty servant cries out in despair, begs for forgiveness, and begs not to be put into eternal sleep, deciding that the prince is having an attack of madness. Already in the carriage, the prince asks Nicephore if he's overdone it. She supports him and considers the punishment well-deserved. The young gentleman says that he would tolerate words about himself, but he will not forgive anyone who drags her into dirty rumors. Nicephorus thinks that he is a good fellow, and the servant simply forgot his place and deserved punishment. The prince admits he finds this strange. She's still a baby, but she feels almost like his equal. Then he asks if she has a different appearance. Hearing this, the girl remembers her face as the former empress and thinks that he felt something. Zion notes that she is from the Rizian family, which means anything is possible. Nicephorus decides that he asked just like that, but is still surprised. The young gentleman takes her hand and kisses it. He thanks her for not being afraid of him and confesses that he wishes she would grow up and talk sooner. The girl notices his smile and doesn't understand what's happening to him. Touching him, she feels his breathing quicken and his body grow cold. The protagonist realizes the symptoms are dangerous and tries to do nothing. Meanwhile, the prince begins scratching his face. She thinks he's losing control and might attack without realizing it. The sound reminds her of the moment she absorbed someone else's power. The little lady realizes that this is a rejection reaction, and the energy is raging inside his body. In Atlantis, absorbing another's power was punishable by death. Nicephorus realizes he hardly did it intentionally, and he's increasingly at a loss to understand what Kaorten has done. The protagonist begs him to come to his senses and offers to re-enter the resonance. She gently rubs his arm and asks him to wake up. Coming to, Zion immediately asks if she's okay. After confirming that she's okay, he thanks fate with relief, fearing he might have harmed her. The girl asks if he knows his symptoms. The boy explains that he suffers from insanity and, during his attacks, can lose control and attack. The prince thanks her for doing nothing. Nicephore understands why no one is with him and thinks of the servants who might have gotten hurt trying to help. She decides that access to the secret imperial library might help her find out what spell Kaorten cast. It's a forbidden power, passed down from generation to generation. Nicephore thinks that if she had noticed Kaorten and Duma's betrayal earlier, he wouldn't have suffered so much. The servant announces his arrival. The young master picks up Nicephorus and offers to go. The protagonist doesn't immediately understand where they are. Seeing a woman on a mural, she thinks it's herself. Zion warns her that it will be noisy inside and asks her not to be afraid. The little lady thinks she's already scared and curses Kaorten again for his disfigured face. Upon entering the palace, the servants are puzzled as to why this lady is here. The emperor asks why the crown prince came with Rizian's daughter. Zion greets his majesty and says that they are together, after which he asks what happened. The young gentleman states that he has something to report and speaks of a resonance with Nicephorus. The servants are shocked by what they hear, and the prince does not understand the reason for such a reaction. The emperor anxiously inquires about his condition. The butler replies that there are no changes, and the girl is completely healthy and as charming as ever. His Majesty speculates that, according to legend, she was meant to be an offering, but the result was different. Zion admits that she too wants to understand why. Hybert enters the hall and declares that even if Nicephorus is a dragon princess, it is unacceptable to discuss her without her family. The elder brother asks if it is possible to formally protest against the crown prince. The protagonist thinks Nathaniel has already told Hybert everything. Both are worried and angry, but she doesn't understand how they dare speak to the emperor like that. The little lady is afraid that her brothers might be punished right now and understands that such behavior is dangerous. Nicephorus waves her arms desperately, showing that she is okay, but because of her age, no one understands her. Hybert, looking at his sister, makes sure she's all right and apologizes for his abruptness. The emperor asks if they understand their words. The silver-haired young gentleman explains that Nicephorus belongs to the Rizian family, and they were unaware of the resonance until now. Hebert says that anything related to Nicephore should be known first and foremost by her family, and such meetings should not take place without notifying relatives. The main character agrees, believing that this time the brothers are right. The emperor acknowledges the omission and promises to take it into account. He suggests postponing the matter, as the day is, after all, special. His Majesty officially congratulates them on their release from the status of offering. Hybert thanks the Emperor and asks permission to ask a few questions. The elder brother wonders if the Dragon Princess's strength or quality of life could be reduced, or if someone else could gain her abilities. He clarifies that if the resonance intensifies and the curse weakens but the princess is not around, will the Crown Prince's attacks stop? Nicephorus understands that her brother wants to hear that if her condition improves, she will be able to be near Zion. She doesn't think she's going to be with him forever. When he gets better, she'll go travel and enjoy her freedom. The butler reports that the resonance was too weak and that observation is needed for at least 3 months. He adds that information about the former dragon princess is extremely limited and that it is kept in a secret library. The Emperor concludes that madness is difficult to cure. The butler suggests studying the current princess in more detail, especially since she is of the Coral Fairies race. The main character immediately thinks that she also wants to get into the secret library. Zion hugs her and asks her not to worry, promising not to harm her. The girl is indignant, realizing that this is not what he's talking about. The young gentleman says that he knows this feeling well and will not hurt her, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Nicephor believes that no one in this world can hurt her. She simply wants to go to the library and regrets that she can't show it with gestures or water. The Emperor announces that, effective today, Nicephorus's location will change. A separate palace has been prepared for the Dragon Princess. The next day, she arrives at the new palace and is amazed by its beauty. The maid shows her the bed and asks if she likes it. The girl thinks that the room is magnificent and that such a bed is worthy of an empress. The maid says that the closet is full of cute clothes and shoes and invites you to try them on. Nicephor is amazed by the size of the wardrobe, and the maids bring one dress after another. Suddenly, her brothers come into the room and ask why it is so noisy. Nathaniel says he has a gift for her and hands her a box. After opening it, the little lady thinks that it is the lucky stone of the giant monsters, and it probably belonged to her mother. The main character is surprised, because such a stone is extremely difficult to obtain. Adele, seeing the bracelet, says that it disappeared on the day of the escape and wonders how it ended up here. The brothers ask for more explanation. The maid recounts that that morning, Lady Ninnis placed the bracelet on the princess's wrist. During the escape from the assassin, the jewelry fell off and was presumed lost. Adele speculates that the bracelet may have fallen at the entrance to the estate, slipping from the princess's hands. It would have been impossible to retrieve it by then. The protagonist thinks it's amazing Adele wasn't hurt in all that chaos, and it seems the stone is the culprit. After their escape, they were quickly tracked down, and that's when this realization dawns on her. Nathaniel says the bracelet was found by the fireplace. The maid immediately remembers that there was a secret exit next to the fireplace. The pink-haired brother carefully places the bracelet on his sister's hand. At this moment, Nicephorus thinks that her mother must have already sensed something was wrong. Suddenly, the bespectacled maid falls to the floor, breaks a plate, and hurriedly asks for forgiveness. Hybert informs his sister that a celebration will soon take place in honor of her becoming a dragon princess. The celebration will take place at the Pearl Palace, and traditionally, the host is responsible for everything, but due to her age, he has taken it upon himself. Hearing this, the girl is happy, because she has never been involved in organizing holidays, and remembers that Cowerton always did this before. Hybert clarifies that the holiday will be in 2 weeks and asks everyone to be ready. Nathaniel looks at the closet and asks his brother if he filled it with jewelry for his sister. The little lady thinks it was all done too quickly. This could only have been ordered on the very first day of their meeting, and it's clear from his look that this man is convinced he's better than the Emperor. Nathaniel explains that he and his brother collected jewelry together, including treasures obtained after defeating pirates. Hybert reminds his brother that there is still much to do and gently suggests that he leave. The pink-haired young gentleman tells his sister he would like to live with her at the Pearl Palace, but now that she is no longer an offering, he will have to return to the Rizan estate. Nicephorus tries to console him and thinks that it's time for him to go, because Hybert is already tired of waiting. The pink-haired boy decides that his sister wants him around and asks her directly about it. The protagonist realizes he's misunderstood. Her brother says they'll see each other later and kisses her on the cheek, but she thinks he's starting to tire her out. Nicephorus hears him promise to come more often, after which he says goodbye and leaves. The little lady is thinking about the upcoming holiday and doesn't understand what it will be like. 2 weeks later, on the day of the celebration, the maids admire the little lady and say that she is the most charming in the world. The maids regretfully note that only one servant will be able to accompany her to the celebration. The maids ask Adele to remember every little thing and then tell them everything in detail, wishing them a good time. Seeing the young gentleman, Adele invites her mistress to look at him. Cyan announces that he has come for Nicephorus. Upon seeing him, the girl thinks he is dazzling and only grows more beautiful with each passing day. The maid greets him and says she is glad to meet him. The prince takes the girl in his arms and admits that he feels great today thanks to her. He's been feeling better and better all along the way. The main character understands that she was by his side for the entire 2 weeks, and that is why he did not have any attacks. Zion warns that there will be many annoying people inside, and the aristocrats won't like the news of the outcry. The girl doesn't understand why. The prince explains that the aristocrats do not like the strengthening of imperial power and want to increase their own influence, so they will openly express their hostility. Hearing this, Nicephorus thinks they're scoundrels, but she doesn't care. She decides he shouldn't worry, since she never runs from a fight. The young gentleman smiles and says that the little lady should not be so upset, because this is not a battlefield. Nicephorus still decides to be on guard. The prince says everyone has gathered to congratulate her, and is unlikely to go too far. He adds that if anyone dares, they will be plunged into eternal sleep. At this moment, the girl thinks that it is he who scares her the most. The prince opens the door, and the butler announces the arrival of the crown prince and the dragon princess. The ladies in the audience admire her beauty, but one man remarks that he expected more, and another agrees with him. Hearing this, Nicephorus remembers their faces and begins to act up, which baffles the maid. The prince assumes that she doesn't like something, and Adele offers to take the girl from him. The maid asks if she wants to be a walker. The girl agrees, thinking that perhaps she'll have a chance to get into the secret library. The prince asks her to be careful and not fall. Nicephorus is perplexed how this is possible in a walker. She decides to first deal with those people she didn't like. The aristocrats whisper among themselves, thinking that she is just a child and does not understand her own strength. One of them says that she has a good face, and that she will become even more interesting with time. Another agrees and makes a sarcastic remark about the Duchess of Razian, who was too big for her boots and ended badly. Before he could finish speaking, he pours champagne over himself and indignantly asks what kind of childish antics this is. The man defends himself by saying that the drink spilled on its own and asks if they noticed. Nicephorus thinks that she will not allow her mother to be insulted. She believes that she has dealt with everyone in the hall, suppresses the aura, and quickly leaves for the other end of the castle. Suddenly, the girl feels that something interesting is about to happen and heads towards the door on a walker. The red-haired man angrily demands silence and asks how many times he has to repeat who is knocking. Upon seeing him, the little lady realized that in front of her was a high-class magician with stars on his chest. The magician asks in surprise if she really is the dragon princess. Entering the room, Nicephorus sees scattered sheets of paper and, picking one up, reads about the language of the sea giants and the tasks of the ancient magic of the Atlanteans, realizing that he studied here. The man clutches his head and screams that these aren't toys. The girl doesn't understand what he means. Nicephorus notices mistakes in each sheet and realizes that the third option was correct. The magician is shocked and asks if she pointed out the correct answer with her finger, not understanding how a child could understand better than him. He thinks that the girl not only knows the language of the sea giants, and this is clearly not simple intuition. The magician introduces himself as Jackaloth and asks to be accepted as a student, begging to teach him this. Hearing this, the main character thinks that all magicians are a little strange for calling a child a mentor and understands that this is a chance. She decides to be considered a genius, but her powers will remain hidden. This will reduce the threat and help her gain access to the secret library. The magician asks if she will accept him as a student. Nicephorus decides to start by crying and calling someone, after which she screams loudly. A few minutes later, the prince and her brothers run into the room, demanding to know who dared to offend her. The girl thinks that they arrived so quickly because they were standing outside the door. Nathaniel sternly asks who hurt his sister, and the prince takes her in his arms and calls the magician a bad uncle. Nicephorus is capricious and crying. The prince offers water, and the magician immediately brings it. Having received the water, the girl uses magic to form letters, asking to call the chief magician, deciding to make a deal. Already at the table with the emperor, And the magicians, she thinks that she only wanted to talk and gain access to the library. The chief magician, Elaid Iblosa, does not understand why everyone has gathered, especially with the participation of the sage. Jackalot enthusiastically declares that the dragon princess is a genius, capable of solving the most complex problem in an instant. The chief mage demands responsibility for such words, and Jackaloth puts his authority on the line. Elaid hands her the sheet and invites her to read it. The girl understands that this is a collection of recipes from sea giants, but the chief magician considers the text too complicated for her. Using water, Nicephorus asks what will happen if she reads it out loud. The sage asks if she knows the language of the sea giants, and she wonders why he is leaning so close. The mage asks when she learned magic, and she reveals that she has known it since birth. The emperor says that she is Rizian, and this is not surprising, because her brothers are also outstanding, even though she is just a baby. His Majesty adds that there are many geniuses in the world, and people deny her talent because they cannot recognize it. The emperor decides to keep her abilities a secret because she is still a child and has the right to a childhood. The great sage smiles and says that he would like to live until she grows up and work with her. The chief magician adds that he needs to live even longer to create new magical techniques together. Nicephorus thinks she didn't actually give consent, and she only needs access to the library. Through it, they could obtain valuable information. The emperor refuses, saying that opening the library would make her a target even beyond the empire's borders. The chief magician proposes a compromise after 10 years of research, and the sage supports him, promising benefits to the emperor. Hearing this, the emperor asks if they are offering a deal. Elaid assures that he will bring documents from the library to his office, where the princess can study them. The great sage agrees, considering this option safe and unnoticeable. Cowerton asks the little lady's opinion, and she happily waves her hands, thinking it's a great solution. The emperor suggests saying what specific materials should be brought from the library. Using water, Nicephorus reveals that she needs records of the first emperor and the death of the ancient empress of Atlantis. A few minutes later, the emperor calls for Zion, and the girl is surprised to learn that he had been outside the door the whole time. His Majesty asks if he heard everything. The prince confirms it, and the emperor reminds him to call him uncle in private, and says that this place belongs to him. The prince asks his uncle what he wants to get from the chief magician and sage. Kayortan responds that the situation is unstable, Roxborough's intentions are unknown, and preparations for an attack are possible. The emperor says war can be declared and they can be destroyed, but then the people will suffer. When the time comes, they must become the strength of the empire. Nicephorus understands that the emperor is preparing magicians and sages in case of war, and considers this the thinking of a true ruler. Kayortan admits that the symptoms of madness are getting worse, but he holds on, not knowing his limits. The prince asks him not to say that, and Nicephorus wonders how he feels, because even reading about it inspires fear. The emperor tells the prince that he must become stronger. The girl sees that, despite everything, he cares for his nephew. His Majesty adds that until the prince grows up, he will have to wear clothes that are not made to his measurements. The girl feels she can't tell them anything. Even if they are descendants of Kawertan, their suffering doesn't make her feel any better. She understands that she's still just a child and incapable of solving this problem, so all she can do is wait until she grows up. The days dragged on, sometimes slowly, sometimes flying by. During this time, the main character grew noticeably, turning 2 years and 1 month old. Nicephorus becomes curious whether the chief magician and the sage are tired, and how many invitations have already been sent to them. Adele picks the girl up and asks what they'll play today. The little lady replies she wants to play tumbleweed. The maid reminds her that Her Highness spent the entire day in bed yesterday. The girl asks for a book and, taking it, thinks it's already creased and needs to be rewritten. Nicephorus reflects on how diligently she studied all the documents about the fall of the Atlantean Empire. In her entire life, she had never seen a description of a wave capable of engulfing an entire country. The sea in the records appeared as a gigantic, enraged monster. All achievements were destroyed in an instant, and then the water slowly covered the empire. Nicephorus thinks she's reread this countless times. She still can't picture the scene, and what follows is the regret of the first emperor of Kartan. The main character understands that this part can be skipped, but it is from this point that the most interesting part begins. She reads the lines after the emperor's repentance, and each time she feels the same shock, anger, and despair as the first time she read them. Nicephorus thinks she should read the passage again, But she's angry that he still hasn't finished the most important part. She understands that after this difficult offer, he described his actions after the destruction of Atlantis. The Atlanteans had to get used to life on land, and for the people left without support, he created a new faith, hoping to preserve the memory of Atlantis. The little lady doesn't understand what kind of faith he created, since the Ramed shrine worships the god of the earth. She thinks he sealed it himself and wanted to perpetuate Atlantis. The girl suddenly declares that she is Atlantis and screams. The maid immediately asks if everything is okay and offers a refreshing juice. Nicefor says she's thirsty and thinks about how much she's putting Adele through. Hybert comes to visit his sister and calls her lazy with a smile because she is doing nothing today. The girl asks if he considers this a compliment, but the brother immediately objects. She asks why he came, since he is very busy, and notes that even after becoming a duke, he visits her at the first opportunity. Her brother tells her he read a popular book about children and learned that this age is very important. He then gives her a new toy and invites her to play with it to develop her perception. The little lady doesn't know what to do with it, and then she smears her palm with paint and puts it on the gentleman's face. The maid is surprised and offers to wipe her hands, bring juice and hot chocolate for the young master. Hybert, seeing his sister laugh, asks what's making her so happy. She points at him and says he's drinking chocolate. The young gentleman wonders what's so strange about this. Nicephor thinks she didn't say anything out loud, but simply assumed he had a sweet tooth, and smiles, as it doesn't match his appearance. The main character thinks this is strange, since Nathaniel doesn't like sweets. Hybert notices her capriciousness and invites her to ask any questions. Nicephorus wants to learn about Atlantis and the first emperor, but realizes her brother doesn't know. Then she remembers the previous empress. The girl remembers that there is no record of her death anywhere and decides to ask Hybert about it. She notices the maid's surprised face and realizes that she asked an unnecessary question. Adele offers to change Her Highness's clothes. The girl doesn't understand why, as she can't remember when she got so dirty. Nicephoro thinks she's touched on a forbidden topic. The maid quietly says it's best not to mention the former empress, as it's a painful memory. Adele says her mother, Mrs. Ninus, considered the previous empress an older sister. After the tragedy, she stopped eating and drinking, and it was hard to see. The main character understands their reaction, says that she didn't know, and thanks Adele for the explanation. The maid remembers the words of Lady Ninus, which she wanted to convey to the little lady, and asks if she can say them on her behalf. Nicephore agrees. Adele says that those born with the power of the sea dragon have a painful attachment. The former empress had it for her lover, and the current emperor has it for his sister. This obsession can manifest itself as friendship, infatuation, or familial love. Nicephore doesn't understand why people tell her this. The maid says, in the words of Lady Ninus, that when the crown prince begins to become attached to her, there is no need to resist, because she is capable of healing his illness. Adele adds that because of their age difference, he will see her as a younger sister and wonders if she will become part of his family for the sake of the people. The pink-haired woman places her hand on the girl's head and says that she wants her daughter as a dragon princess to fulfill her duty responsibly. The maid notices that the prince seems to have already become attached to her since he visits her every day. The main character thinks that she would not say that, because she never saw her mother, but she imagines her as a person who first thought about the people. Her mother was an aristocrat and tried to fulfill all the duties assigned to her. The little lady says she likes people like that, and that her mother was wonderful. Adele agrees, saying she always protected her daughter. Hybert says he doesn't even want to imagine how they'll become one family. Nicephore realizes he's heard everything and asks if Sion is stronger than him. Brother says that next time he will bring his sister something that will occupy her little mouth. A couple of days later, Nicephore dines with the prince, becomes capricious, and after a few spoonfuls of cake, refuses to eat any more. The prince says the cake is delicious, offers her some more, and calls her foe. Hearing this, the girl screams and asks not to call her that because she doesn't like it. The little lady remembers that Nathaniel came up with this nickname, and everyone treats the great empress like a child. Sion asks what he should call her, and says that only he will call her Nikki. He repeats that she is his Nikki. She thinks it's dangerous because he might not want to let her go, and she's only here to lift the curse. The main character realizes that before leaving the palace, she definitely wants to go to the library. The prince says that after the wedding, she will become empress and can live there. She replies that it is too long. Sion promises a gift and hands over a box containing a precious stone named Sleeping Nymph. Seeing him, the girl thinks that the nymph is a water fairy who has been sleeping for at least 500 years, and that a contract can be made with her. The nymph's powers allow her to breathe underwater for a while, and the prince is confident that Nikki will be able to awaken her. Nicephorus thinks she doesn't need to breathe underwater, but nymphs know too much to be useless. She takes the stone and wishes for the nymph to wake up, offering to fulfill her request and even find her a mate. The nymph asks to find her mate and says that she is trapped inside a stone, sealed by people more than 1,000 years ago. Nicephorus says that he won't leave it like that, because he knows sealing spells well. The nymph promises to tell everything if her mate is found. Nicephorus replies that he will find her, no matter how much time and money it takes. The girl asks the prince where he found the stone. He replies that he bought it at auction, but she says it's only half and there could be several pairs. Zion offers to collect as much as possible and announces that the largest night auction is currently taking place, inviting her to go with him. Nicephorus agrees and thinks that she will definitely find a match by looking at the stone. Parts of a single stone are called family stones. To seal a nymph, stones of the same class and origin were used. Nicephorus thinks that finding a match will not be difficult if you find an object of the same shape, type, and place of creation. In the carriage, she looks at the prince and thinks that she hardly recognizes him because they have both changed. Zion says that Nathaniel and Hybert will arrive at the palace in a few days and offers to buy Nathaniel a gift. Hearing this, Nicephorus thinks Nathaniel is going away, but Zion doesn't want to talk about it. She shows him a blank check from the emperor. The prince says that there will be many people at the auction and asks them to hold his hand tightly. Once inside, Zion gives her binoculars so she can see better. He helps hold it, and the girl says that number 9 looks interesting. The host thanks the guests and announces the beginning of the last day of the auction. Nicephorus says she wants room number 9. The prince replies that it's still a long way off and suggests they get some sleep. The girl objects and says that she will watch, and he asks if it makes her sleepy. She thinks that in her baby body, she really wants to sleep, and decides to lie down for a bit. Hearing the announcement of number 9, she jumps up and shouts that it's her turn. The prince asks her not to worry about the price. During the auction, Nicephorus notices a familiar man and says that he is Roxborough's subordinate. Zion is sure that he also wants this lot and knows about its importance. The prince offers to make the maximum bet, and the girl agrees. After some time, she learns that they have won and happily thanks the prince. Zion looks at Roxborough and thinks he deserved to lose. The young gentleman asks if Nicephorus wants anything else. She replies that she needs a few more things, and he says that more stones will appear. Suddenly, Nicephorus sees a stone and realizes that this is the right pair, deciding to bet the maximum again. Roxborough's servant is angry, thinking that because of this little brat, he missed the stone ordered by his king. He reflects that this stone was the best and realizes that he will have to get rid of the rest of his purchases. A man approaches him and tells him that the crown prince has ordered that everything be learned about the buyers of the stones. The servant understands that he will return to his master empty-handed. Nicephorus looks at the jewels and thinks that she can make exactly 4 of them. She speculates that thanks to these brooches, people will be able to sense each other's state of mind at any distance. The girl understands that all the brooches will turn red even with 1 wound, and this is too much for her body. After a while, she says that everything is ready. There is almost no strength left, but the main thing is that the nymph has become a fish. Nicephorus looks at the water fish and says that it is time to tell about the seal. The fish explains that this is the seal of time and rebirth, which is removed by itself at the right moment. Nicephorus understands that it was precisely because of this seal that they were unable to plunge her into eternal sleep. The nymph says that she has retained her memory and herself, and is also under strong protection from external evil. The girl thinks that the nymphs and the sea do not lie, so it is true. The protagonist says it's a lie, but the fish objects. Nicephorus claims that Kaorten and Duma betrayed her and doesn't understand this reincarnation with protection. The nymph assures him that the seal's purpose is beyond doubt. Then she recalls him telling her that no matter what, he would never leave her. Nicephorus thought it didn't matter what kind of magic they'd used. They hadn't explained anything to her, they'd simply cast a seal and made no attempt to understand her or side with her. The main character decided that she would never forgive these traitors. Sometime later, Nathaniel came into his sister's room. He asked if she was okay. The little lady asked if he was alone, and learned that her brother was currently in the countryside, and would return later. Nicephore asked Nadi if he was leaving too. He replied that it was hard for him to leave his sweet Fofo and admitted that he didn't want to leave, but by the time he returned, she would be much older. The girl asked how far he was going. His brother explained that these were winter exercises at the pole, and every noble family was obliged to send a representative. Since he was the eldest and a duke, he would be the one going. At that moment, the main character thought that it would be better if she went herself, but she was still too small and had to stay here. Nathaniel assured them that everything would be fine, the path was safe, and the magicians would go with them. The little lady reached under her pillow, pulled out a stone, and said she'd made it especially for him. The brother thanked her and delightedly declared it a special gift from his little sister. The girl asked if he liked her and received a confident yes. At that moment, she thought it was dangerous to trust others, but she couldn't deny her affection for him. Nicephorus asked her brother to always carry the stone with him and demanded a promise. He assured her he would not part with it and gave his word. The little lady felt relieved and stretched out her arms for him to pick her up. Her brother smiled and said she was a real cutie and probably wanted to be just like her older brother. The girl thought about how she was actually hundreds of years older than him, but he didn't know it. Nicephorus hugged her brother and asked him to be careful, otherwise she would get angry. He promised to be very careful and hugged her tightly. A few days later, the main character noticed that the emperor was supposed to arrive at 10, but it was already 12. Suddenly, a maid entered the room and announced that the emperor's escort knight, Lucas, was on his way to see her. When the knight greeted the girl, she thought that he had come to make excuses for the emperor's lateness. Lucas said that the emperor had suffered a severe attack of madness 2 hours ago, much more severe than usual, and he still had not gotten better. Nicephorus screamed and asked why she hadn't been called immediately. The knight explained that they had initially underestimated the danger and apologized. The little lady asked if Zion was okay. Lucas replied that he was feeling a little better, but the palace's backyard was completely destroyed. The girl realized things were very bad. When they entered the master's room, she saw the prince sitting and happily asked if she had arrived. The little lady immediately ran up to him and asked if he was okay and if he had gotten worse. Zion replied that he felt good because she was nearby. She touched his chest and said that he should feel better, not understanding why the resonance wasn't working completely. Nicephoro asked the servants about medicine, but they told her that it was useless during attacks. The main character decided that she had to help and remembered a note in a book about how touching enhances resonance. The little lady kissed the prince, deciding to take advantage of the moment to make him feel better. She saw that the prince's condition had stabilized and realized how powerful the kiss was. Zion thanked her and called her his angel of happiness and good luck, apologizing for the worries. The main character was glad that he was finally feeling better, took his hand, and told him that she would become his family and that he should always tell her if he felt bad. The prince replied that he would definitely tell, because now they were family. The emperor reported that Zion had fallen asleep again and asked the little lady when she would stop being angry. Nicephorus was extremely dissatisfied and thought that she was almost not angry, but the fact of being late still remained. His Majesty asked what he could do to stop her from being angry. Nicephorus extended her hand and told him to give her money, declaring that time was money. She specified the price, 100 gold coins for every second of his time. The emperor was surprised and asked if she was a creditor, not understanding why she spoke so confidently about money. The little lady replied that he had upset her and that gold would make things a little better. The emperor said that he could not just spend the treasury and offered to give her a gift, for example, a beautiful boat with a protective spell. Nicephorus was delighted to imagine frequent walks to the sea and said that spells were not necessary, because if the boat capsized, it would simply splash around in the water. The girl asked how much such a spell cost. Hearing about the gold bar, she demanded it and asked if he was greedy. The emperor objected, and the girl declared that he was a big, greedy man with a very small soul. His Majesty decided not to argue and announced that he was making a deal. Nicephorus was delighted, as she received both the boat and the gold bar. At this time, the prince thought that everything had gone according to plan, and sometimes it was useful to deliberately lose one's temper so as not to leave Nikki alone with his uncle. He remembered his mother's words that one day he would have something that was only his, and he decided that Nikki belonged only to him. A few days later, it was time for Nathaniel to go on winter training, which was supposed to last about a year, because the mages could prevent misfortunes and attacks. the brother approached the little lady and asked if she wanted to kiss him goodbye. She opened her arms for a hug, assuming he only needed to come closer. Nathaniel asked if she wanted to see how tough he was and wondered what she was up to. The girl said that she had been saving up her strength for this day, hugged her brother and cast a spell so that his heart would not stop under any circumstances, and then kissed him on the cheek. The young master felt as if the whole world was at his feet. Hebert also came to say goodbye and told his brother to be careful. Nathaniel assured him that everything would be fine and asked him to look after their fofo. When her brother left, the main character tried not to think about the long separation, knowing that he would return in a year at most. Hebert told his little sister that she could cry because she was so sweet. 5 years later, the worst thing that could happen to a 7-year-old child happened. Nicephorus noticed the poisonous needle and thought with irritation that it was only getting more and more annoying as she got older, because the poison had no effect on her. The main character ordered the servants to appear immediately and called them unworthy swindlers who dared to try to put a small child into eternal sleep. She offered them to apologize, but they remained silent, and the girl realized that her order was being ignored. She suddenly remembered that she herself had forbidden them to speak, binding their throats with magic. When the spell wore off, they began to beg for mercy. Nicephor said there were places it was better not to go and asked if they understood everything, glad that at 7 years old she could more easily use the power of the sea. The girls stated that they would be executed for attempting to put the dragon princess into eternal sleep, but clarified that they were only the perpetrators and that the real clients were more important. The main character decided to throw them into the dungeon for now and could use them later. Nicephorus remembered that it was already 9 o'clock and Zion should be arriving soon, surprised by the early footsteps outside the door. She thought that the prince would be worried and might get angry if he found out the truth, and decided to pretend to be asleep. The prince sat down next to her and said he was already there, asking what had happened. The girl stood up and replied that she knew nothing. Zion said that she had imprisoned the killers and noted that she still didn't trust him. Hearing this, the main character objected and quickly changed the subject, asking why he came so early. His Highness explained that there was a large gathering today, and she guessed that the conversation would be about the worst thing that could happen to a child. The prince confirmed and said that they would decide whether to continue the search for those missing during the winter exercises. Nathaniel never returned, and the girl understood that the aristocrats were against the search, considering previous attempts to be failures. The prince added that the first 2 detachments found nothing, and therefore they do not want to spend any more money. Nicephor called them cruel and insensitive, because even their families participated in the exercises. Zion explained that they sent illegitimate or weak heirs there and therefore did not want to look, but Nathaniel was very important to her. His Majesty suggested that she have breakfast first and asked if she was hungry. At the table, Nicephor said her brooch was fine and learned the prince's was too. She confidently declared her brother was alive. At that moment, she felt a surge of power and, squeezing the fork, broke it. The prince worriedly asked if she was okay. She replied that only her fork was damaged, so he decided to feed her himself. The main character thought that the sea giants could help find Nathaniel and began to think about the secret library. The prince said that access there was only possible after marriage, and jokingly suggested that they get married right now. He reminded that he is not yet an emperor, and only the emperor, empress, and heir can enter there. Nicephorus remembered that she had asked about this many times before, and thought about secret entry, but Kayortan's spell was too strong. She didn't understand what exactly he wanted to hide. Zion explained that permission would cause a scandal among the aristocrats. The girl decided that she needed to do something incredible so that the aristocrats wouldn't dare object and ask for access as a reward. Hearing this, the prince praised her and said that he would find out if she could help at the meeting. Nicephor said the meeting was soon and hurried him along. He replied that they would see each other later. The little lady went to the dungeon, asked the servants who wanted to live and who wanted to die, and decided to spare them. She offered them the chance to become the castle's official assassins, assuring them that it was a real, paid position. The girl announced a salary of 500 gold pieces per month, taking into account the danger of the work. She warned that for betrayal they would become shark food. The men fell to their knees, swore allegiance, and confessed that they had acted on the orders of the Crescents. Nicephor recalled that the Crescents were the largest organization of assassins whose goals were still undiscovered. She also recalled past assassination attempts, after which she said that they now serve her. To save their lives, the mercenaries agreed, and the girl gave the first order to name the location of the headquarters. The princess remembered that at the age of 5, she had learned to escape from the palace. Outside, the men showed her a gold coin shop where they received orders, and the owner said that children were not allowed. The servants drew their swords, frightening the seller, and the main character thought that they were already working off their payment. The men proudly declared that although they were not the best killers, they fought excellently. Nicephorus walked inside and saw men asking in surprise who had let the child in there. She said she had a question for them, but in response she heard ridicule. The girl coldly replied that her mother was already dead, and with the help of magic she neutralized them, grabbing one by the hair. The man remained silent, and she thought she had gone too far. But she learned that the crescent moon did indeed operate through intermediaries. However, even the middlemen didn't know who was behind the crescent, as orders were passed unnoticed right on the street. Hearing this, the protagonist thought everything was too confusing. Even if she found more intermediaries, none of them would know the true face of the crescent moon. It became clear to her that it would be far more useful to see the moment when the crescent moon makes direct contact. Nicephorus understood that all this was unlikely to be resolved so simply and quickly. At this time, the General Assembly, which convened every 3 months, was in session. All influential aristocrats, heads of families, their heirs, and those who did not own their own estates but wielded significant influence at court were required to attend. In total, there were 333 people in the hall. From the very beginning of the meeting, all conversation revolved around the dragon princess. One of the nobles said the girl was already 7 years old, yet the crown prince's condition had remained unchanged. His wife suggested the prophecy might have been wrong. The man said he believed the dragon princess would help the crown prince, but perhaps she wasn't the real thing. He believed the true dragon princess would have handled this long ago. However, a woman in the audience stood up for the princess. She stated that such talk was inappropriate now, as the girl was only 7 years old. Another gentleman reminded her that the girl had been born with a great prophecy, but was now too young, and they should wait. His father added that no oath was necessary for that. The dark-haired aristocrat noted that it was impossible to ignore the fact that Roxborough was growing stronger. If an invasion occurred in 10 years, they would again claim the princess was still too young and weak. He also noted that after meeting the dragon princess, Crown Prince Roxborough no longer appeared in the empire, and it can be assumed that the child's pride was hurt. The elder stated that if Roxborough was really up to something, then the prince needed to get rid of his madness as soon as possible. The black-haired aristocrat sharply remarked that the princess, who was supposedly supposed to heal the prince, didn't even appear in public. He said this showed a complete lack of upbringing, and he couldn't understand why a true dragon princess would behave like that. At that moment, Hybert entered the room and noted with a grin that the gentleman seemed to be enjoying himself very much. He offered to repeat his words aloud and added that the conversation had just been about his younger sister's condition. Hearing this, the aristocrats thought that he was immediately addressing them informally and was behaving extremely impolitely. Hybert said that after such words, one would think his sister had been deliberately called the Dragon Princess. He offered to bring the real princess if he thought she was a fake, and if he couldn't, he should shut his mouth. The aristocrat noticed that the Duke was clearly beside himself with anger, and realized he didn't want such rumors, especially considering his family was few in number. Hybert replied that he didn't care what he thought. A few minutes later, the aristocrats were again astonished by what they saw. The sea dragon's power was separating a portion of their consciousness and giving it form without a physical body. The emperor announced that the General Assembly would begin immediately. At this time, the main character was walking with a maid. The maid noticed a shell, picked it up, and asked if it was beautiful. The little lady replied that she liked shells. The maid said that the shell was just like the little lady, beautiful and valuable, and the next moment, it suddenly fell to the ground. Nicephor thought she couldn't understand how this girl had ever become a maid in the imperial castle. She remembered her saying she was simply lucky to get the job, and realized that her luck must have been incredible. The protagonist thought the meeting should have ended by now, and deliberately wet her dress. She wondered what the maid would do if she turned away for just a second. The maid noticed that the princess was all wet and might get sick. The girl reassured her, saying that everything was fine, since it was summer. The maid said that if she caught even the slightest cold, Madame Adele would put her into eternal sleep. She picked the girl up, suggested she hurry, and promised to play with her tomorrow. She also asked if she had spoken to the sea, calling it very sweet. Nicephorus thought about how she couldn't admit that she had actually spoken to the sea. When they returned to the palace, the prince noticed that the girl was completely wet. She explained that they had been playing by the sea and asked if the meeting was over. Zion said the little lady should take a hot bath, and then he'd tell her the good news. The girl was surprised, thinking he was referring to their morning conversation, and said she was going for a swim. The main character thought that it seemed like there was a way to find Nathaniel after all. The little lady quickly washed herself, changed her clothes, and immediately ran to the prince, reminding him that he had promised to tell her everything. Zion said that Mr. Ryzian could also listen. At that moment, Nicephorus thought their relationship was still far from ideal. Zion warned her not to be surprised, and informed her that the ruins of sea giants had been discovered. He asked if she knew what they were. The girl reflected on the fact that she had even once met them. During the time of Atlantis, many races lived together in the sea, and the sea giants were among them. They typically lived for about 200 years, and their leaders lived to be 500. Due to their long lifespan, they left almost no offspring and eventually disappeared. The girl felt a strange sensation, as she hadn't thought anything of them could remain. The prince said that first of all, a huge path was found, as well as stone pillars with unknown symbols. Hebert suggested it might have been a temple. Zion replied that he didn't know for sure, as there were so few surviving records, but the discovery was nonetheless extremely important. Nicephor thought that Atlantis seemed unbelievable to modern people. If magical objects from that time were found, they would be sold for enormous sums, and everything found would become the property of the imperial family. The girl decided there were certainly things the imperial family hadn't yet discovered. She thought of items with sea giant spells, and at that moment the prince announced that he had recommended the Ryzian family to assist the research team. Nicephor asked if she could join the expedition and was accepted. She figured there was no better translator than her anyway, so she decided to pack her things first. She recently realized that the third search party had not been sent due to a lack of funds, and decided that she would earn it herself. A few days later, they set out for the ruins with a new exploration team. According to the map, the journey took 10 days, but with the portal, it was reduced to 5 minutes. Nicephor asked to leave the carriage and suggested doing so immediately. The maid objected, reminding her that it was dangerous. The girl thought they were being overly concerned about her. The prince explained that outside the castle, the risk of bandit attacks increased. The little lady still declared she would go, and Sion merely said he'd known it. He added that the ruins are located on a coastline untouched by human activity for a long time. Strong winds and rough seas prevail there, making the area ripe for attack. The protagonist thought that this would sound scary to ordinary people. At that moment, she heard the nymph's voice, telling her not to worry, because she had them. Zion regretfully informed her that he couldn't go with them because he had to guard the castle. He asked her to tell him everything upon her return and to be wary if anything seemed strange. He also said that if danger arose, she should leave Mr. Ryzian and run away. The main character thought that she had never had a case where a palace or something like that had sunk because of her. Sitting in the carriage, the maid announced that they were leaving. The girl wondered how many ruins had already been discovered, and whether 6 days and 5 nights would be enough to explore them all. Adele said they could take a look, since they had already arrived. When they got out of the carriage, they were met by the emperor and the count. The man reported that they had managed to decipher 1 stone. The princess was surprised, unable to understand how so many people had been able to accomplish so little. The emperor ordered the decryption to be brought, and then left, asking the princess to follow him. The girl thought she wouldn't follow him and turned in the other direction. Adele asked where she was going. The little lady said they needed to examine everything carefully, as the servants might have missed something. She was certain there were treasures here that hadn't yet been discovered, and she set out to search. A few minutes later, the girl found herself in a familiar place and thought she'd been here before. Adele noticed her worried expression and asked if anything was hurting. Nicephor replied that everything was fine, remembering that she'd come here with Doom. She remembered how, during their reign, they would visit the distant market of the sea giants to buy some things. Doom said there was a market near the capital, and he didn't understand why they had to go so far. The Empress replied that they hadn't walked for a long time and complained of a stomachache. She said she wanted to go for a walk and suggested meeting in a couple of hours. Doom was surprised why a person with a stomachache was going for a walk. The Empress did not answer, and he still did not understand her actions. The main character remembered that she could hardly remember what exactly she wanted to buy, but she knew for sure that it was an item enchanted by the sea giants. Adele suggested they look around. Nicephore thought protective items were common among giant artifacts, as there were many attacks in those days. She decided to find the place where the store for protection and jewelry was located. The girl knew that if she was lucky, she'd find something truly valuable. She suggested going inside, but the maid objected, afraid of breaking something. The little lady assured her they were just going to have a look. The guard stopped them and said entry was prohibited. The maid was indignant, asking how they dared to block the path of the great dragon princess. She explained that they were only looking around and asked them not to interfere. The guards apologized for not recognizing Her Highness and let them pass. As the princess passed, one of them thought he saw a fairy and decided to keep the moment to himself. The maid looked at the wall and was surprised by its size, not understanding how it could even stand and not collapse. Suddenly, Adele noticed statues that resembled turtles. Nicephore explained that these structures were originally built on land, not on the seabed, so nothing would collapse. The girl decided it was time to get down to business and asked the nymphs if there were any magical items there. The fish quickly examined everything and reported that they had already taken everything. Nicephore realized that, with the help of the nymphs, she could secretly find treasures. They also had the ability to absorb objects and store them within themselves. The tiny nymphs could store volumes the size of a puddle or even a pond. The girl didn't expect her first attempt to be such a failure, and she wondered where to look next. Adele reported finding a secret staircase, but Bavolki fell down it. Nicephore thought it wasn't a secret passage at all, but a regular entrance for short guests. She couldn't understand why the passage was so small, given the giants were enormous. Adele asked how the maid was feeling, and she replied that everything was fine, apologizing for the disturbance. Adele suggested they get up quickly and stop fooling around. Nicephore thought the maid should have been hurt by such a fall, but she wasn't even scratched. The girl glanced at the entrance and realized that an ordinary person would definitely have been hurt. She glanced again at the maid and noticed that she appeared completely unharmed. The princess decided not to think about it anymore. She had too much to do, and the maid was just lucky. Nicephore said that there was nothing more to do here and asked where they should go next. She considered the place's strangely empty appearance and couldn't understand why. Then she turned to her bracelet, asking it to bring her good luck. The girl said that they would visit only one more place and then ran away. Adele asked Bavolki to take her time, promising to look after the princess. Bavolki objected and suggested they go together. The little lady noticed that all the doors were open except one. She thought that perhaps her luck was finally about to hit the fan. Nicephore pointed to the door and suggested going inside, noticing that there were no guards nearby. Adele asked the knight why the place wasn't guarded. He replied that it couldn't be entered, so no guards were needed. The girl immediately realized there was definitely something there. She decided that the door simply couldn't be opened and that another entrance needed to be found. Nicephore noticed another door, removed the cobwebs with magic, and cleared the passage. The maid asked, in surprise, if there was anything there. The girl replied that there was, but the door wouldn't open. Adele suggested she try it herself. Nicephore thought that there was a curse on this place, since the door did not give in, and decided to use her power. The maid noticed the inscription on the door. The girl read the words about using force, fighting, and winning. Nicephore decided she might actually have to fight the building. Opening the door, she sensed its energy. The nymphs told her she'd have to overcome it to enter. The girl realized that this would not be easy and ordered the maids to stop anyone who tried to interfere. The guards warned her against entering and that it was dangerous. One of the knights shouted that she wouldn't succeed anyway. Suddenly, Nicephore opened the door, ordered the knights to be detained, and stepped inside, crying out joyfully that she had found it. She saw the treasures of the sea giants. Among the many jewels was one of the symbols of ancient Atlantis, crafted with incredible delicacy. The girl took the ring and thought that such beauty must be cursed. It was the second symbol of ancient Atlantis. The sea giants also loved to create strange things. Some spells helped steal food, and earrings always gave wrong answers. Nicephore decided it didn't matter what the items, spells were. The important thing was that they were ancient and could sell for a very high price. At that moment, the emperor entered the room and said that he had been looking for her, asking if she was going to take everything for herself. The princess cried out that not at all, and explained that she was just looking around and wanted to call the others later. The emperor looked around the room and noticed that it was full of curiosities. The girl countered, saying that these were true treasures that she had discovered and that only she had been able to open the door. Nicephore declared that everything she found must belong to her. If not, she would simply close the door and never open it again. The head of the expedition said that all these things are cultural heritage, and this cannot be done. The Duke asked the emperor if he would really allow this. The emperor turned to the girl and offered to leave her what she held in her hands, acknowledging that she deserved a reward for her find. At that moment, the main character thought that His Majesty had finally agreed to her blackmail. The magician cries out and addresses the emperor, saying that all the items found are incredibly important. His Majesty asks why they didn't come earlier and find this place themselves, as they were only able to decipher one stone pillar. Hearing this, the princess thought the situation seemed strange. The pillars didn't seem too complex, and it was unclear why she could only understand one. His Majesty notes that the young dragon princess did an excellent job, as it was she who found this place. But the Duke objects, saying that she knew about the treasure in advance and never told anyone about it. The emperor asks if the Duke really thinks he'll give away such important information. Hearing this, the Duke bows his head and apologizes. The little lady felt sorry for them and thought she could prepare a reward. In exchange, she said she would decipher 10 stone pillars and, if necessary, complete them all within 5 days. The mages are surprised and ask if she knows the language of the ancient sea giants. At that moment, she thinks she's already 7 years old, and it's time to start showing off her abilities. The girl says that if they don't believe her, they can ask the great sage. After that, she is allowed to take whatever she wants. The magicians understand that for the sages, deciphering the pillars is of great value, which cannot be said about the magicians themselves. Nicephorus thought that she too was a little offended, because she could have gone further, and the nymphs would have found something else. The protagonist reflects on the fact that she will receive a large sum of money after selling her finds. These funds will help launch a third expedition to search for Nathaniel. The next day, the sage approaches the princess and says they haven't seen each other for a long time. The lady realizes that after their long correspondence, she and Ingeniosi have become very close, and she calls him by his nickname. When the man picks the girl up, she notices that he has more wrinkles. He replies that it's because he's longing, as he hasn't seen her in a long time. Nicephore reminds him that they met just a few weeks ago. He replies that such an old man wants to see her as often as possible before he dies, and she thinks he has at least 50 more years to live. The sage says that the princess doesn't like to beat around the bush and suggests getting started right away. The girl recounts that for Morpheline and Cactus's wedding, they gave 50 rings and 40 precious stones. The sea giants distributed these gifts to all the guests. The research director asks her to read the inscription. Upon seeing it, the girl says it's a bad word, and the director understands why they found it strange. The main character asks if anyone is against her taking the treasure. The group leader allows her to take everything. The girl thinks this is excellent, because now the treasures are officially hers, and there will be no problem selling them. Adele takes an umbrella and says it might rain soon. The sage remarks that the deciphering will become more difficult and suggests the princess go and rest. The protagonist recalls that it had rained that day too. She was late because she was looking for something Cowerton would like. The princess thinks there's no point in remembering the rain, and that she shouldn't have dwelled on it. She encourages herself, deciding not to frown anymore. The emperor tells the girl that at her age, it's better to jump in puddles. Nicephorus doesn't understand why Cowerton suddenly started talking to her, as his increased interest could be dangerous. Nicephor replies that she doesn't want to do that and suggests he do it himself. He crouches down next to her and says that such games aren't for him, adding that he's heard about the funny guys she hired. Hearing this, the main character realizes that he is talking about a guild that can put people into eternal sleep. His Majesty says he understands why all this is being done to find Nathaniel. He promises to definitely send a third search party. The main character confidently says that Nathaniel is definitely alive, because she knows this from the brooch, and he will definitely be found. The emperor says that he heard about her from Lord Rizian and asks when she managed to find her. The princess replies that she made the brooch herself and gave it to him just in case. The emperor notes her true talent. Cowerton reports that they were last seen in the polar region, and then they seem to disappear. The girl thinks she could easily find him there, and wonders where the sea giants have gone. Nathaniel asks His Majesty if the seabed has been searched. If there are no traces, perhaps they fell to the bottom and are there. The emperor replied that people couldn't survive on the seabed because they couldn't breathe underwater. He added that there was no sign of a shipwreck, so there was no need to worry. The protagonist reflects that even their ancestors couldn't breathe underwater, and only she can. No one from her era remains. A servant announces that the cardinal has arrived from La Merta. Kahortan says it's time for him to leave, and the princess suggests he take his jacket and look neat. His Majesty remarks that only she can speak to him like that. He sees that she is bored and offers to accompany her to a meeting with the cardinal. Nicefero notices that the rain has suddenly stopped. Then she sees a boy greeting the emperor and thanking him for his help. The main character thinks the priest from La Merta bears a strange resemblance to Doom. She wonders where the cardinal is. The assistant explains that this is the cardinal. Despite being 11 years old, he has remarkable skills and was able to stop the rains and bring back the sun. The princess doesn't understand how such a little boy can change the weather. The emperor tells the servants that they can return to work. The cardinal greets the girl. At this moment, the main character thinks that one more word and he'll be finished. The boy introduces himself as Helio of La Merta and says he's glad to meet the dragon princess in person. He offers her a candy. The princess thinks again about why he looks so much like Doom. Suddenly, the girl feels herself being lifted into someone's arms. She cries out in pain and asks him to control the force. His Highness replies that this way she will understand more quickly when she becomes stronger. The girl demands the starfish elixir, and he replies that he will give it to her later. The emperor says he'll send for the elixir upon his return to the castle, and that she's had enough. The princess is indignant, considering this too strict. Kahortan carries the girl over his shoulder and tells her that if she's finished her business, she can go back. He adds that she shouldn't be friends with this suspicious boy. Nathaniel asks what difference it makes to him, whether she is friends with someone or not. Helio asks the princess's name. The girl replies that she is nice for a reason, and the cardinal says he can simply be called Helio. The protagonist reflects on how difficult it must be to become a cardinal at such a young age. Then she asks if he could come with her if he's not busy. The princess and Helio visit several places. She soon realizes he has poor directions, as she had to search for him 4 times. Unable to bear it, the girl screams and asks why he came without an escort if he can't find his way. The boy explains that the Holy Father told him to study on his own. The girl wonders why he seems so harmless to her and realizes she was wrong to compare him to Doom. Helio says he's the reason she had to walk longer and offers a blessing against fatigue. The girl is surprised and asks how that's possible. He replies that it's a little trick and promises to grant Lady Nicomphoris protection. The girl feels her fatigue melt away, thanks him, and offers to be friends. Helio explains that her body responds well to blessings. The girl asks if it's different. The boy says that it is different for everyone, and that blessings are usually not suitable for members of the imperial family due to rejection. Nicefero suggests that the reason lies in the energy of the sea and the power of the sea dragon that the imperial family possesses. The main character understands that this scoundrel Kahortan is to blame for everything. Helio says he's sorry, but it's time to return to the temple. Evening is approaching, and he can't linger. The boy says the princess can call him any time, and as a friend, he will always help. Nicefero suggests returning to the noose. That evening, by the fire, the girl thinks about Zion. She runs into the tent and says that she's always amazed by him, and even a little envious. The prince replies that in time she will be able to do the same and asks if everything is all right with her. The princess talks about her new friend and the blessing that helped her recover. She promises to introduce them later. Zion says he'd be happy to meet her. He explains that she hasn't had any seizures, but warns that things won't be easy for her upon her return. Nicefero is certain that a single touch will solve everything. She thinks she must try to ease Zion's suffering. Suddenly, the prince disappears. The girl, confused by what has happened, screams, demanding that His Highness be found. Adele reports that a strange reaction has begun at the stone column, and the princess is urgently summoned there. The great sage went first. The main character thinks that she needs to go there with Hybert. The prince asks if they will go together and joins them. When they reach the column, the torches go out. The knights say they can't see anything. The prince says he'll help light the torches and return. The girl thinks the object is the cause of the commotion and asks the nymphs if they saw anything. The nymphs say there are mercenaries nearby again. The girl is relieved to think that Hybert and Adele are okay. Suddenly, a cry for help is heard, and the princess remembers that she forgot about Bovoki. Nacheforo asks the nymphs if they see anything, but they say no. She doesn't understand where the voice came from. Suddenly, a frightened maid appears and says she's very scared. The girl is glad she's not injured and suggests her brother go to the site of the explosion. The protagonist notices that the closer they get, the stronger the smell of blood becomes. She becomes curious about what happened there. Upon arrival, they see the sage lying on the ground. They realize that an explosion occurred while examining the tablet. The girl thinks that in order to help Inga, she needs to destroy the tablet. When the princess touches the wall, she sees an inscription about the great empress of Atlantis, the eternal friend of the sea giants. Anyone who touches the stone will be cursed, except her. The inscription says that she must build the ship of Atlantis and find the sea giants in the permafrost on the snow-white land where tears become ice. Nicephorus realizes the sea giants are alive and waiting for her. But first, she needs to lift the curse from the sage. The magician tells the princess not to approach, fearing the curse will spread. The girl replies that Ingi is her friend, and she cannot leave him to die. Sion asks Nicephorus if everything is okay and if she can handle it. She's confident she can. After using magic, she becomes extremely tired and falls to the ground. Her brother says she's fine, she just fell asleep. The emperor reports that the great sage is breathing and orders him to be taken to the infirmary. The next day, Bovoki cries out that his majesty has awakened. Adele approaches the girl and greets her. The maid cries with joy, saying that thank the gods the princess has awakened. Nicephor doesn't understand why she's crying. Adele replies that she was very worried and cannot imagine what would have happened if something had happened to her. The princess says she's fine and asks about the great sage. Adele replies that he woke up 3 hours ago and wanted to see her. Adele asks if her mistress is hungry and promises to quickly prepare breakfast. The main character thinks it's a shame to make everyone worry, but after the release of power, she feels great. The girl wonders if the tablet that wounded Inge is destroyed. She realizes it contained a message from the sea giants, addressed specifically to her. Nicephor decides she'll find out for herself when she meets them. To do this, she needs to build an Atlantean ship and travel to the pole where Nathaniel disappeared. The next day, Adele says the princess needs to return to the palace immediately. The place is too dangerous, and she needs to be examined by her personal physician. The girl feels her body is healthy, but it's not working properly. She agrees, because she still needs to meet Zion. The maid says that she will immediately begin preparing for departure. The expedition thanks the princess for her help and says that without her they would have lost the great sage. Nicephorus replies that she simply did what she had to. The sage notes that she is, as always, modest. The sage thanks the girl with all his heart and admits that he is afraid to die, even despite his age. The princess says she doesn't want to lose Ing either. Then she confidently adds that he must live for at least another 50 years. The little lady remarks that if he truly wants to thank her, he can help her with one thing. After this, she asks for support and influence in the magic tower. The sage doesn't understand how he can be of any use and asks her a question. The little lady whispers something quietly in his ear, and after that, he agrees to help. Returning to the palace, the princess's first priority was to see Zion. He was deeply worried about her, and this was the first time they had been apart for so long. Running through the corridors, the girl thought about how Zion's energy had always been unstable. Suddenly, she ran into the prince's assistant, who was visibly surprised to see her. The princess explains that Zion doesn't know about her return, and she wants to scare him a little. When she opened the door, the prince abruptly said that he had ordered her not to let anyone in, and then asked if she was tired of living. At that moment, Nicephor thought she'd never seen him like this before. It turned out he looked especially serious while working. The young gentleman noticed Nikki and was genuinely pleased. He immediately asked when she had returned and reminded her that she wasn't scheduled to arrive until the following day. The girl explains that she arrived early because she missed him very much. The prince says he'll have food brought and asks her to wait a bit. He also asks if she managed to get what she wanted in those ruins. Nicephor shows the prince the ring and says it's a gift for him. She adds that this is the secret, and that's why she's giving the ring only to him. The princess suggests trying to harness the ring's power, explaining that it's a relic of the sea giants. It has a curious spell that can cause anyone nearby to go bald. Zion smiles and says he'll definitely use it when he's with His Majesty. He thanks the girl for the gift and promises to keep it very carefully. The prince suddenly says he doesn't understand where the smell is coming from. The girl asks what she smells like, and he replies that someone left their mark on her, and he wants to know who. The servant announces that a snack has arrived. At this point, the main character notices that the dish looks very appetizing. The young gentleman asks who her new friend is. The lady replies that his name is Helio, and that he is a cardinal of the Church of La Merta. Nicephora says that Helio commanded the rain to stop, and the weather immediately cleared. Afterwards, she asks the prince if he can do the same. Zion explains that cardinals have power over certain phenomena, and perhaps he really can control rain. At this point, the protagonist thinks that Helio turned out to be more capable than she expected, and it's good that they became friends. The prince remarks that she must have had fun with her new friend. The princess explains that they wandered around various places and that he even cast a blessing on her. She thinks Nathaniel would also enjoy hearing stories about the ruins and resolves to find her brother. After some time, the young gentleman reflects on how anyone dared to leave their mark on what belongs to him. He doesn't understand how the Church of La Merta has allowed such things to happen. Zion is too angry to let this go unnoticed. At the moment of the first resonance, his constant desire to plunge others into eternal sleep weakens, and for the first time, he feels alive. The prince thinks that Helio left his disgusting smell on Nikki because he wants to take her away from him. The prince orders his servants to destroy the temple. The mercenary asks whether the believer should be put into eternal sleep. The young gentleman replies that Nikki won't like that. He orders that the temple be simply demolished and everything that generates income from donations destroyed, and that he ensure that no one is harmed. Zion doesn't understand what to do next, because even next to her, he still loses control. At this point, Helio announces his return. The red-haired gentleman asks if he's met the dragon princess. In the central temple of La Merta, there exists an entity known as God. He took a part of himself and created Helio. The boy says he has indeed met the dragon princess. He admits he's not sure if she is who he hopes she will be. At this moment, Helios thinks the man can read his mind. He feels he was created only out of necessity and that this man doesn't love him. The boy remembers how happy he was when the girl said she would become his friend. Helios says he clearly left a mark of God on the princess, and it seems she didn't notice. She took it as a sign of friendship. The man asks if he got along well with the dragon. At this point, the boy thinks he'll never escape from here again. Meanwhile, the aristocrats are discussing how Her Majesty saved the life of a great sage. They are baffled by how such a young girl managed such a task and assume she must have some special ability. Nicephora reflects that she didn't set out to achieve this, but now everyone admires her talents. These abilities and achievements can now be filed away in a secret archive, and all she has to do is wait for public opinion to settle. The main character doesn't understand what to do next because Zion should have arrived by now. When the girl opens the door, she sees the prince's assistant, who informs her that His Majesty has not yet risen. Hearing this, she thinks that he might be sick and begins to worry, because he has never slept for so long. The princess says she'll go to Zion herself and asks the servant not to worry. She thinks the obsidian ring she gave him yesterday might be the cause. Entering the prince's room, Nicephora sees him lying on the bed. Coming closer and touching his face, she realizes he has a fever. The girl asks what the doctor said and whether he took his medication. She confidently says that he became ill because he worked late again. His Majesty replies that he is fine and explains that he wanted to get up to see her, but in the end, she came on her own. The main character assures him that she will visit him until he recovers and asks him not to doubt it. She also says that he can't work today. Zion replies that he has business to complete. The little lady says she'll do it for him, remembering that she was an empress in her past life and doesn't shy away from work out of laziness. Nicephora asks if he should call a servant. The young master replies that he gave everyone the day off as soon as he felt the fever. Hearing this, the girl thinks he didn't mean to show his weakness. Only she sees him like this, and therefore is obliged to protect him. The little lady asks if there's anything to do and if everything is on the desk. The prince replies that all the papers are there, and she says she'll take care of them. After some time, the protagonist clarifies what these documents are. The young gentleman explains that they are related to a New Year's party, and the girl understands that he is required to participate in such events. She thinks that instead of these boring techniques, it would be much more useful to simply look at the sea. Nicephora suggests throwing the party outdoors, by the sea, rather than indoors. She adds that boating is an option, as New Year's Eve falls in the summer here. Zion says he's interested in the idea and asks if Nikki would like to write out all the instructions himself. The princess agrees and thinks that she will write everything down to the smallest detail. While working at her desk, the princess falls asleep. The young master picks her up and quietly tells her she can sleep a little longer since she's so small and still tries to protect him. The prince lays the girl on his bed and thinks about how beautiful she is. The young gentleman reflects on his regret for feigning illness and forcing Nikki to work. He understands how upset she would be if she learned of the temple's destruction, and he thinks how wonderful it would be to work with her every day. Zion looks over the documents the princess prepared and realizes the top ones are the most important. But something is still missing. He knows how much Nikki expects from this banquet. The prince takes the seal intended for emergency orders and places it on the documents the girl was working with. Sitting on the bed next to her, he thinks that thanks to her, he's having new dreams. He looks at her sleeping face and wonders what she dreams about, and even imagines how one day they'll get married. The young gentleman understands that he will have to wait a very long time, because the princess is still a child. 3 days later, the emperor convenes a special meeting to recognize the dragon princess's contribution to the ruins. Exploration. He declares her contribution to the nation's development to be immense and deserving of a reward. The magician reports that the princess saved the life of the great sage, and therefore the sage's tower will never forget her feat. The aristocrats note that the young dragon princess assessed the situation faster than anyone else and showed herself to be a wise and noble person. The emperor says he wants to reward her. The girl objects, declaring that her reward will be access to the secret library, and then asks what merits she has for that. She lists that she saved the great sage, found many cultural treasures, and quickly translated the tablets, believing that this was quite enough. The duke asks if she understands what she's talking about. Hearing this, the girl thinks the man is being foolish and replies that the library contains the documents she needs. The duke offers to tell her exactly what documents, declaring that it would be easier for him to find them and bring them himself. The princess thinks she didn't like him at first sight. Overhearing the conversation, the emperor decides that he will cover for her if she makes a fuss. Nicephor replies that it's none of his business. The man responds that, as expected, her grace is boundless and she is truly majestic. The man asks her to repeat what she said. She again says it's none of his business. Hearing this, he admits he's been waiting 10 years to hear those words. The emperor proposes to reconsider the matter and asks if everyone agrees with the duke. The aristocrats claim that the princess's services merit her other rewards besides access to the secret library and offer to choose who will go with her. The main character looks at the count and thinks he's up to something. She wants to understand what he's thinking. His Majesty declares the meeting closed and announces that the secret library will be opened immediately. Hearing this, Nicephorus thinks that he will finally see the notes left by Kaorton. The girl asks the prince when she can enter. He explains that she must wait for 5 witnesses from noble families and 1 each from the magicians and sages, otherwise even the emperor will not have the right to enter. The main character decides to look around while they wait, not understanding what is so great about this place that she cannot enter it alone. The princess touches the column and believes it is made from the ribs of whales with hexagonal tails. These creatures were extremely difficult to catch due to their dangerousness. Nicephorus wonders if Doom helped build the library and doesn't understand why she thinks about him so often lately. Seeing the emperor, the little lady asks if she can come in. He asks for witnesses to sign and tells the girl that there's only a little time left and she must be patient. Entering the library, the princess sees that it is incredibly ancient and at the same time perfectly preserved, probably thanks to whale bones. Kaorton informs her that the first emperor's records are elsewhere. Hearing this, the girl sets out to search for them and, within minutes, finds his diary. The prince says he'll help Nikki, as only authorized members of the imperial family can obtain the book. Taking out the diary, he suggests she read it calmly and take her time. Opening the book, the girl realized it was indeed the handwriting of Kaorton, whom she knew. The periods at the ends of sentences and the curved lines were familiar to her from hundreds of documents. The protagonist feels a strange thrill as she reads his words again. Perhaps because she wants to believe he wouldn't betray her. Nicephorus wonders if he really wanted to become emperor. She suggests he should have simply asked, and she would have given in without hesitation. At this point, she reads the lines about how the ruler must remain calm and composed, and decides to continue reading. The girl reads that a month after the founding of the state, all was well. The people readily accepted the new faith, but the image of another man and the memory of the sea goddess still lingered in their hearts. The protagonist realizes that the Lamerta religion was founded by Kawarten. She doesn't know who the sea goddess is and doesn't remember such a faith. Nicephore decides that she needs to go to the main temple of Lamerta as soon as possible. Suddenly, the girl sees her face on the cover and wonders why he depicted it in such detail. Then she reads that their goddess, who should be remembered and celebrated, is Tarasa, goddess of the sea. At this moment, the princess thinks that he sealed her, considering her a deity, and thus condemned her to suffering. The protagonist realizes that the diary contains no mention of Kawartan's happiness. Only his pain remains. Nicephore reads that a year after the founding of the state, his body fell into disrepair, his blood cooling and then boiling again. He describes the pain as if his body were disintegrating and being reassembled, and suggests that his children will have to endure the same. Kawartan realizes what he's done and understands there's no turning back. The sin he bears is the price for his foolishness, and he must endure it all. After reading the penultimate page, the princess thinks that there are no more documents connecting her and Kawartan. Having finished the diary, the protagonist realizes that, as always, he breaks off mid-sentence. Ultimately, all he has achieved is that she is reborn into this generation. The girl understands why he sealed her away for 1,000 years, though he never wrote down the reason. She wonders why the diary contains no mention of his friend Doom, since it was because of Doom that Kawartan handed her over. The princess is sure that there must be something else in the diary, and that this cannot be everything. Suddenly, she notices a page that's thicker than the others and realizes the sheets are glued together. She remembers that in Atlantis, this was how they hid something truly important. Nicephore thought that if she carefully wet the edges of the page and carefully peeled them apart, she might be able to find out what exactly the author was trying to hide. She recalled the moment the seal was broken, and she awoke in the body of a child. All the people she knew had already disappeared, and everything dear to her remained in the past, forcing her to live in the future with only memories. The girl remembered how lonely she had been then. She couldn't even imagine she could endure such deep and oppressive loneliness. Suddenly, she heard the prince's voice asking if she was okay. The princess replied that she wanted to read a little longer, and thought about how kind Zion was and how he didn't even try to pry. At that moment, Nicephorus opened the glued pages and saw a strange symbol. She didn't understand its meaning, but she sensed that Doom had left the note, and she wondered what he had meant. The main character did not understand how this could be deciphered, because in front of her there were only incomprehensible numbers without explanation. The emperor noticed the girl sitting on the floor and asked why she was acting like that. He thought she must have found what she was looking for, since she was reacting that way. His Majesty came closer and told her it was time to get up. The girl showed him the numbers, but he didn't understand what she was talking about, and added that it was time for them to leave anyway and get ready. Nicephore wondered if they could have conspired to betray her. She couldn't understand why Kawartan had hidden the note if she had ended up being reborn as a dragon princess 1,000 years later. The prince asked if she'd learned everything she wanted. At that moment, the girl realized she still didn't understand who the first dragon princess had been, since the diary only spoke of Kawartan's suffering. Returning to her room, the princess remained pensive. The servants were confused about what had happened to her. The protagonist again ran the numbers from the notes through her head. The dates had appeared in Kawartan's diary, but she suspected they might be connected to something entirely different. The girl decided to recall all the previously read entries that related to Kawartan and Atlantis. The princess remembered that the sea had been destroyed because of the sins it had committed. An ordinary person could not have known such a thing in advance, and what had been done could no longer be undone. Nicephorus had read that Atlantis, along with its entire culture, sank beneath the waves, and only 2 apostles survived. She thought Doom might have been referring to the number of survivors, but the figures didn't add up as there were more survivors. The main character remembered the prince and thought he reminded her of someone. Roxborough's ancestors could have been Atlanteans, and the first dragon princess may also have come from Atlantis, and was clearly no ordinary human. The girl decided that Kawartan wasn't cursed by the sea dragon if he had cursed himself and his descendants. This meant that the dragon princess had used Atlantean magic to heal him. Nicephorus suggested that the Rhaetian family was created so that someone outside the imperial line could lift this curse, and that person was supposed to be her. Kawartan had hoped for her and had built an incredibly complex and intricate. The girl realized there must be another reason. She remembered that one cannot take an oath before the age of 15 and realized she would have to wait another 7 years. Nicephorus heard the servants arguing over which of them should approach her and thought that they had completely stopped being afraid. One of the servants approached Her Majesty and offered to try the cake. He explained that he had just bought it with his own salary. The princess thanked him and asked if the cake was expensive. The servant suggested she try it quickly, and after taking a bite, the girl thought it was delicious and that she'd learned enough for today. Nicephorus remembered the servant's words about the cake being bought with his salary and decided that it was time for her to start earning money herself. The main character announced that she was going to make money. Hearing this, Hebert was surprised and asked why she had suddenly decided to take up such a venture and how exactly she planned to do it. The girl thought that she had come to this decision after much thought, and he simply could not understand it. She showed off the jewelry she'd found in the ruins and said she'd sell it for cash. She didn't know where to start, though, as selling everything at once was impossible. The brother remarked that these items could have enormous cultural significance. The little lady replied that the emperor had given her permission to keep them, and she wondered if she had smuggled most of them out. Nicephorus firmly stated that she needed money, and as much of it as possible, so that she could spend it as she saw fit. The girl explained that she would spend them on building a ship, and then hire people and go with them to the Arctic. Hebert asked if she was going to look for Nathaniel herself. She replied that since Hebe was busy, she would go herself and check on the sea giants. The young gentleman remarked that it would take years to build a large ship. The girl said that was a good thing, since she would be grown up by then. The brother calculated that about 100 billion would be needed. The little lady suggested selling the jewelry for as much as possible. Hebert said that then they would have to hold an auction, but that alone would not be enough, and they would have to come up with something that would attract a lot of attention. At that moment, the main character thought that it would not be difficult, because she could get anything she wanted from the emperor, the great sage, and the lord of the magic tower. Several days later, in the Tower of the Sages, a sacred abode of knowledge and research, the scientists were immersed in their work, but they were all united by an interest in ancient Atlantis. The sages envied the dragon princess's ability to understand the language of the ancient giants, and some treated her with suspicion. A man in a green robe announced that the dragon princess was putting sea giant artifacts up for sale. Meanwhile, in the magic tower, magicians and those who were always arguing, united by an interest in magic and ancient Atlantis, gathered. Atlantean magic was rare in their era, and many mages took a particular interest in the ancestor of the dragon princess, Nicephorus Rezian. The mages discussed how they needed to raise money and buy back everything the princess was selling, especially the sea giants, artifacts. The head of the Imperial Palace's Historical Preservation Department lost consciousness in shock upon learning of the sale of cultural artifacts at auction. One magician offered to buy everything at auction with a large budget, while another said that applications for its use had already been submitted. On the long-awaited day of the auction, the main character felt a strong sense of excitement as she had received items from the Emperor, the Great Sage, and the Lord of the Magic Tower for this event. The girl understood that she would receive a 5% commission on the sales of these items. Suddenly, the prince picked up the little lady in his arms and offered to go together. Seeing her brother, the girl asked if there were many guests. He replied that there were a great many, and she could see for herself. The main character took Zion's hand and invited them to watch together. Peering behind the curtains, she saw a huge crowd. The prince said many people had come from the Tower of the Sages, the Magic Tower, and the Department of Historical Preservation. The girl noticed the guests from other countries and thought she could raise the necessary amount. Hebert announced that the auction would begin soon, took the girl from the curtains, and led her to the place. Nicephorus thought that her brother could have simply told her how many people had come, since she would have seen them soon anyway. Suddenly, the main character noticed Helio and didn't understand what he was doing there. However, she thought she had wanted to see him anyway. The girl looked at him and didn't understand how to approach him, and whether she would be able to talk to him alone. The prince noticed her intrigued gaze and asked where she was looking. At that moment, Nicephorus thought Zion disliked Helio. She replied that she was not looking anywhere, and added that the auction was already starting. The main character looked at the sitting men and did not understand why they came if they were just sitting motionless, and whether they would stay like that until the end. Helio noticed the girl, and she smiled back and waved. Zion asked if she was hungry and said they had prepared a snack. She replied that she was hungry, remembering that she hadn't even had breakfast. The prince took the meat and offered to feed it to her. The surprised lady reminded him that he was the crown prince and asked if he could do such a thing. His Majesty replied that he often did this in the palace. The girl noted that they were not in the palace, but she still agreed, and he fed her. At that moment, she thought that the prince was polite, caring, and also handsome and sweet, and that he would become an ideal husband when he grew up. Zion looked at her and asked what she was thinking about. She replied that she was thinking about the luck of the woman who married him. The prince did not understand why she needed to talk about another girl, and said that he already had a princess. Nicefor explained that the crown prince and the dragon princess were related, but they did not have to marry, and he had to find someone he loved. Hearing this, the prince became sad. The girl thought she had said something wrong and began to worry that she had made him feel abandoned. At that moment, Helio approached them and greeted His Highness and the princess. The prince asked warily why the servants of the fallen religion had come here, and added that he did not expect to see those who should be praying in their temple. The fair-haired boy replied that it was God's blessing, and they came because of a special item at the auction. The main character did not understand the tense atmosphere and remembered Zion's words about the strange smell. His Highness reported that he had recently sent a gift to Lemaire and asked if it had been received. Helios replied that because of this, many innocent believers were left homeless. Zion stated that they could do with learning humility, but the boy objected, saying that believers do not sin. Hearing this, the main character decided to reconcile them and said that she was glad to see Helio. The girl mentioned that there was some kind of smell left on her and asked him if he knew where it came from. The blonde boy explained that it was an accident and the smell was due to the blood blessing that made her uncomfortable. Nicephorus said she understood and knew it wasn't on purpose, then added that she would talk to him later. After some time, the prince informed Nikki that the total amount of the auction had already reached 10 billion. Hearing this, the main character thought that with that kind of money, she could find her brother Nathaniel. Hebert told his sister that it was time to make a speech, and added that before continuing, they would give the floor to the dragon princess, thanks to whom the auction took place. Nicefor thanked the aristocrats for coming, gave her name, and explained the reason for the auction. The girl said that this was the first time she was speaking about this out loud, and that instead of sending another search ship to the Arctic, she wanted to build her own military ship. She declared that she would find the sea giants in the Arctic, and through them find the missing people, and then asked who was ready to go with her. But suddenly her brother took the microphone from her and said that he would answer all the questions himself. The girl thought that she had said everything she wanted, and now it was Hybert's turn, hoping that he would finish his speech with beautiful words. 5 days later, the emperor said that he regretted not having seen everything with his own eyes, as he had heard that it was impressive. Nicephora replied that everyone was exaggerating a bit. The emperor asked if she planned to build a ship with the money. The main character said that her brother had already found a shipbuilding company, and that she was planning to recreate the ancient ship of Atlantis. Atlantean warships were sleek, fast, and powerful, distinguished by their human-shaped figureheads. At that moment, the princess wondered whose figure to place on the bow of the ship, Hybert or Zion. His Majesty asked if she knew what happened to Zion on the day of the auction. Nicephor replied that she knew nothing, but had only heard that he had spoken at length with Cardinal Lamerta, and did not understand why she was being asked about it. At the same time, she thought that there had been a skirmish between Zion and Helio that she did not want to talk about. The emperor said the prince had been depressed and overworked lately. The girl remarked that was why he was humming to himself. His Majesty explained that he took the prince not out of coercion, but to teach him to work. Nicephor thought that after the auction, Zion had never come to the Mother of Pearl Palace, and perhaps he was just very busy. Kaortan said that the prince was most likely offended by something, remembering how he used to come every day despite being busy. Nicephor replied that the prince was probably simply overloaded with work before the New Year's banquet. His Majesty informed her that this time the banquet would be a masquerade and therefore Zion would have a lot of trouble. Hearing this, the girl thought the emperor was clearly not just enjoying himself, since he was reasoning like that. The princess thought that she liked the orange light and decided to make a mask of the same color, and also order some things for the banquet. The girl said that she wanted to order one thing without Xian and Hebe knowing about it, and explained to the emperor exactly what she had in mind. His Highness made a note and said that he would order everything to be prepared as quickly as possible. A few days later, on the day of the New Year's banquet, the main character looked at the decoration and thought that at first she wanted to do it as a piercing, because some people pierce their ears for this reason. Adele noticed that the weather was fine today and asked if her mistress was going to go boating. the main character replied that she would be the only one on the ship. The maid was surprised and said it was dangerous, but the little lady asked not to worry and explained that she would call Zion if a threat arose. At that moment, she thought that then he would definitely not be able to avoid her. The maid finished her hair and said that everything was ready, asking her to be careful at the end. The Count announced that he had come to see Her Highness off. Upon seeing him, the princess called him by name, and he noted with honor that she remembered him. Nicephor asked the gentleman to give her the mask and immediately asked what had happened to his hair color. Lucas explained that the color has become fashionable. Young girls want to be like her, and young men try to emulate Mr. Nathaniel, which is why the shade is so popular. The Count added that this color was developed by the senior mage of the Magic Tower, Jacquelot. At that moment, the protagonist thought that this idiot still couldn't get rid of her. Lucas asked if she knew about this, and said he thought that was why she hadn't changed her hair color. He added that most of the young ladies at the banquet would have the same hair color as hers. Hearing this, the main character thought that everything was lost, because now she does not understand how Zion was able to recognize her. At the banquet, the young ladies discussed how everyone had the same hair color and worried that they would not be able to recognize the princess even if she were standing right in front of them. The girl with green hair said that according to rumors, the princess is very beautiful and sweet and will eventually become a real beauty. Another countered, saying that Countess Betelgeuse was also very beautiful. She was the only daughter of the goateed prime minister, and she was only 9 years old, but she already had many friends, and she would certainly go far in the future. Nicephorus looked at the girls and thought they looked like turtles sunbathing. After that, she decided to look for Zion. Suddenly, a green-haired girl approached her and asked her name. The protagonist asked why, but at the same time, she thought she didn't like the look in her eyes. The princess said her name was Teresa. Upon hearing this, the lady remarked that the name was unusual and that she was hearing it for the first time. The girl with green hair said it was likely Teresa's first time at such an event and suggested they go together. Another added that if she went alone, she might be laughed at. The green-haired lady introduced herself as Lasayana Betelgeuse and asked what Teresa's last name was. The princess replied that she couldn't give their last name because they were out of town. At that moment, she thought that little children were very cute. Lasayana explained that dancing would soon begin, and at such parties, children were the first to dance. She suggested they see who Teresa would like to dance with, and said she needed to choose wisely, otherwise, she'd end up dancing with just anyone. A friend added that Teresa won't be able to attend many parties before her official debut, so she should choose especially carefully and try to create good memories. Hearing this, the main character thought that initially she had not thought about dancing at all, but the little turtles explained everything so well that now she did not want to disappoint them. Lasayana explained that everyone dances in a single line at first, and after the group dance, a boy must be chosen for the next dance. She added that if something is unclear, they can simply imitate what the others are doing. The princess thought that she had never learned to dance, but she decided that she could do it and began to dance. Suddenly, a black-haired boy stepped on her foot. She immediately calmed him down and said it was okay, because she wasn't a good dancer either. Lasayana suggested dancing together, and the princess accepted. At that moment, the countess warned her to beware of the blonde man behind her, who continued to stare at her. The girl didn't understand the problem and asked if it was bad that he was watching. The countess explained that it was Bane and his minions who were pushing and hitting weak children. Hearing this, the main character assumed Bane was related to that very villain. It seemed she'd been invited to dance as a warning, and she wondered why the green-haired lady was so kind. The main character asked the countess if she had invited her to dance specifically to protect her from trouble, and smiled. Lasayana said that it's not right to laugh so openly, and that one needs to be more serious. She explained that these guys are picking on children who are unaccustomed to such events and bullying them. The princess leaned over to the girl and asked if she was all right. The surprised countess replied that she was fine, then went to her mother and asked if she had danced well. Looking around, Nicephorus realized that all the children had come with their parents. Suddenly, some ladies approached her and asked her what family she was from, offering to give her name. Hearing this, the main character thought they had guessed who she really was. She decided it was time to reveal her identity as a princess, and then intimidate those who had offended Lasayana. At that moment, the prince approached her and said he had been looking for her. After that, They went for a boat ride. The princess asked His Highness if he had seen Count Kuroda's nephew strike Lasayana. He asked if she wanted him to call the boy and scold him, but the lady said it would be better to choose the moment and shame him. The prince replied that he did not want this, and added that the mere thought of talking to him made him want to plunge him into eternal sleep. Nicephorus thought he was thinking these thoughts because they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Zion seemed unstable. She said no one asked him to say such things. The young gentleman admitted that he had not seen her for a long time and could not restrain himself, after which he apologized. The girl explained that the boy was wrong, but not so wrong that he should be put into eternal sleep. He was just a child, and he simply needed to be taught a lesson. The prince said his little lady was right, as always. She asked why he was dissatisfied again, since they hadn't seen each other for so long, and he kept talking about nothing else. At that moment, she thought that since he was like that, she would be drawn to him herself. Nicephorus suggested that the prince tell her directly why he was angry and avoided her, explaining that she herself could not figure it out. Zion admitted he was wrong. The girl asked him not to do it again, and said she'd been worried every day, wondering whether to go to him or not knowing what the right thing to do was.